At my sister's wedding, they locked me in the bathroom and posted in the family group chat, "That's where she belongs. Out here is only for real family." I smiled, made one phone call. 20 minutes later, 5 helicopters descended on the vineyard estate, rotors thundering so loud the ceremony stopped mid-vow. The entire reception froze as military-grade aircraft circled overhead before landing in perfect formation on the lawn. They thought they could humiliate me one last time, lock me away like I was nothing. But what my family didn't know was that the failure they'd spent 34 years looking down on had been hiding the biggest secret of all. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Dr. Alexis Chen-Hartley, and this is the story of how I went from being the forgotten daughter to commanding the very sky above their heads. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier, slipped under a stack of research papers in my apartment near Johns Hopkins. Cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing, the kind of expensive stationery that screamed old money and new pretensions. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. There was no "Dear Alexis" or "Dr. Chen-Hartley." Just 2 words in elegant script: "Current resident." Current resident. Like I was a piece of bulk mail. Like 34 years of shared history could be reduced to an anonymous placeholder. Anastasia Marie Hartley, my younger sister, was marrying Christopher James Rothwell III at the Meadowbrook Estate Vineyard in Napa Valley. The date was circled in gold leaf: Saturday, September 23. Black tie required. RSVP by September 1. I stood at the window of my research lab, looking out over the Baltimore harbor, holding that invitation like it was evidence in a criminal trial. In a way, it was. Evidence of a pattern I'd spent 3 decades trying to ignore. The memory hit me the way it always did when Anna was involved, sudden, sharp, pulling me back to a hospital room 6 years ago. Dad lying in that narrow bed, his once athletic frame reduced to angles and shadows. The pancreatic cancer had taken everything except his clarity. When he gripped my hand with what little strength remained, his eyes held mine with desperate intensity. "Promise me something, Lexi," he'd whispered, using the childhood nickname only he was allowed. "Promise me you'll always look after your sister. I know things haven't been easy between you two, but she's going to need you. Family is everything, sweetheart. It's all we really have in the end." I'd squeezed his hand, tears streaming down my face. "I promise, Dad. I'll take care of her." He'd smiled then, that warm smile that had gotten me through every childhood nightmare and teenage heartbreak. "That's my girl. You've always been the strong one, Alexis. Don't ever forget that." He died 48 hours later. I'd kept that promise even when it cost me. When Anna's interior design business failed after 8 months, I'd quietly paid off her $60,000 in debts. When she wanted to take that certification course in Milan, I'd covered her expenses without her knowing. When she'd called me sobbing at 3 in the morning because some venture capitalist had broken her heart, I'd driven 2 hours to sit with her until sunrise. But somehow, none of it mattered. I was still the sister who got invited like a stranger. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I knew by heart, even though we rarely spoke anymore. It rang 6 times before she answered. "Hartley Residence, Diane speaking." Mom's voice was crisp and formal, the same tone she used with telemarketers and people soliciting donations. "Hi, Mom. It's Alexis." A pause. Just long enough to sting. "Oh, Alexis. What can I do for you?" Not hello. Not how are you. Just straight to transactional business. I forced my voice to stay steady. "I got Anna's wedding invitation. I wanted to confirm my attendance and see if there's anything I can do to help with preparations." Another pause, longer this time. In the background, I could hear the faint sound of a news broadcast, probably financial news, which Mom had become obsessed with since Dad died. "You weren't really expected to come," she said finally. The words landed like ice water. No sugarcoating. No diplomatic cushioning. Just cold, honest indifference. "What do you mean?" I managed to ask, though part of me already knew. Well, dear, you know how these things are. Limited seating, very exclusive guest list. Anastasia has so many friends from her design circles, and Christopher's family is quite prominent. We just assumed you'd be too busy with your work anyway. You always are. I gripped the phone tighter. She's my sister, Mom. Of course she is. And we love you very much. But this is Anastasia's special day, and we want everything to be perfect. You understand, don't you? Perfect. The word that had defined my sister's entire life and, by extension, had defined my absence from it. I hung up without saying goodbye and stood there in my lab, surrounded by millions of dollars of equipment, holding a phone that suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Mom's words echoed, "You weren't really expected to come." But when had I ever been expected anywhere in this family? The memories flooded back, as they always did when the wound was freshly opened. I was 8 years old again, standing in our childhood kitchen in Riverside while Mom fussed over 5-year-old Anna's scraped knee. It was barely a scratch, really, but you'd have thought she'd severed an artery from the way Mom carried on. "Oh, my poor baby girl," Mom had cooed, applying 3 different ointments and a princess bandage. "Mommy's little angel needs to be more careful." Meanwhile, I'd been sitting at the kitchen table with a split lip from falling off the playground equipment, blood still trickling down my chin. When I'd finally worked up the courage to ask for a bandage, Mom had barely glanced my way. "Alexis will be fine," she'd said without looking up from Anna's knee. "She's tough as nails, this one. She can handle anything." That became the family narrative. Alexis the resilient. Alexis the capable. Alexis who never needed anything because she was just so naturally strong. While Anna was Mommy's precious princess who needed to be protected from the world. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what I'd hidden for over a decade. I wasn't just Dr. Alexis Chen-Hartley, research physician at Johns Hopkins anymore. I was Colonel Alexis Chen-Hartley, United States Air Force Reserve, Chief Medical Officer for the Aerospace Medicine Division. And I had direct command authority over resources they couldn't even imagine. 3 weeks later, I stood at the entrance of Meadowbrook Estate Vineyard, watching valets guide luxury vehicles up the winding driveway. The venue was everything I'd expected from Anna, absolutely breathtaking and completely over the top. The historic property sprawled across manicured grounds, its stone facade glowing amber in the late afternoon sun. Thousands of white lights draped from ancient oak trees, and a red carpet stretched from the circular drive to the grand entrance. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a simple navy dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent but looked understated enough not to draw attention. Conservative, elegant, forgettable. Or so I hoped. As I approached the entrance, I could hear a string quartet playing something classical. Through tall windows, I caught glimpses of the reception hall, an explosion of white roses and orchids that must have cost a fortune. I counted at least 30 round tables draped in silk, each with centerpieces taller than children. 300 guests, the invitation had said. I recognized many faces from California's social registers, tech executives, venture capitalists, old money families whose names appeared on museum wings and hospital towers. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a statement. A uniformed usher approached with a practiced smile. "Good evening, ma'am. Name for the guest list?" "Alexis Chen-Hartley. I'm the bride's sister." His smile faltered as he scanned his tablet, clearly not finding what he expected. After an awkward moment, he looked up with forced cheer. "Of course. Right this way, please." As we entered the main hall, I felt the subtle shift in energy that comes when people notice something unexpected. Conversations didn't stop exactly, but they quieted. Eyes turned my way with that particular blend of curiosity and judgment that wealthy people had perfected into an art form. "Is that Anastasia's sister?" I heard someone whisper. "I thought she only had one sister," came the confused response. "Oh no, there are 2. But they don't really get along. Family drama, you know." The usher led me to a table near the back, table 27, according to the calligraphy place card. Not quite the worst table in the room, but close enough to send a message. That's when I saw Anna making her way through the crowd toward me. She looked absolutely radiant in a dress that probably cost more than a car, all flowing silk and delicate beadwork that caught the light with every movement. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elaborate style showcasing diamond earrings that had belonged to our grandmother, the same earrings I'd always assumed would be mine as the eldest granddaughter. Alexis, Anna's voice carried that performative warmth she'd perfected. You actually came. How wonderful. She air-kissed me on both cheeks, European style, careful not to disturb her makeup. You look beautiful, Anna, I said, and meant it. Thank you, sweetie. Oh, you simply must meet Christopher's cousin, Penelope. She runs an art gallery in San Francisco. Penelope, this is my older sister, Alexis. She's a doctor or something. The introduction lasted exactly long enough to be polite before Anna was whisked away by someone else demanding her attention. I watched her glide through the crowd, stopping to embrace and laugh with what seemed like everyone in the room, her joy infectious and apparently genuine. I was still watching when I felt Mom's firm hand on my arm. What happened next, I never could have imagined. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Mom appeared beside me, resplendent in dusty rose silk, wearing the same pearl necklace she'd worn to every important family event for the past 20 years. Her grip on my arm was firm as she guided me toward a quieter corner, away from the main flow of guests. Alexis, darling, she said, her voice low and controlled, her smile never wavering. So lovely that you decided to come after all. Now listen to me carefully. This is Anastasia's day, her special moment. I need you to promise me that you won't do anything to upset her or draw attention to yourself. No family drama. No bringing up old grievances. Just smile, be pleasant, and let your sister have her fairy tale. Can you do that for me? I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. She was actually afraid of what I might do or say. I smiled and nodded like the good daughter I'd always been, swallowing the words I really wanted to speak. But as I stood there, memories crashed over me like waves, each one a reminder of how I'd arrived at this moment. The pattern hadn't started today. It had been building for 34 years. The first memory that surfaced was from when I was 7 years old. It was the incident that should have made me understand, but children are remarkably good at making excuses for the people who are supposed to love them. We'd both entered the Riverside Regional Science Fair. Anna was 4. And I'd helped her create a simple volcano project with baking soda and vinegar. Mine was a complex experiment on plant growth under different light spectrums, complete with detailed charts and a hypothesis I developed myself. Anna's volcano won first place in the primary division. The judges loved how adorable she was, how she lit up the room when explaining her project. Never mind that I'd done 90% of the work. Never mind that she could barely pronounce chemical reaction. My project received an honorable mention in the junior division. At the celebration dinner that night, Dad ordered a cake that said, "Congratulations Anna, first place." There was nothing on it about my honorable mention. When I'd quietly pointed this out, Mom had patted my hand dismissively. "Oh, Alexis, you don't need a cake to know you did well. You're so smart and self-sufficient. But Anna, she needs this kind of encouragement. She's more sensitive than you are." I learned that night that my achievements would always be expected, therefore unremarkable. While Anna's would always be celebrated, no matter how small or artificially supported. The pattern continued through elementary school. When I made the honor roll every single semester, it was met with a brief, "good job," and nothing more. When Anna managed to scrape together a B average in 5th grade, we had a family celebration dinner at the nicest restaurant in town. When I won the regional spelling bee in 6th grade, competing against 8th graders, Mom couldn't attend because she was helping Anna prepare for a school play where she had a non-speaking role as townsperson number 3. "You understand, don't you, sweetheart?" Mom had said when I'd asked why she couldn't come to the spelling bee finals. "You're going to do great no matter what. But Anna really needs my support right now. She's so nervous about being on stage. I'd won the spelling bee. Stood on that stage alone, looking out at the audience from my mother's face, and found only Dad sitting there, beaming with pride but unable to fill the void left by her absence. The real sacrifice came when I was 16 and Dad received his diagnosis. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. The medical bills started arriving like an avalanche. Experimental treatments insurance wouldn't cover, specialists who demanded payment up front, medications that cost more per month than most people's mortgages. I was a junior at Riverside Academy, carrying a perfect 4.0 GPA and captain of the debate team. MIT had already sent recruitment letters. Harvard was interested. Stanford had invited me to their summer program for exceptional students. My physics teacher had told me I was the most naturally gifted student he'd taught in 23 years. But when Dad needed help, there was never really a choice. I need to drop out, I told my parents during one of our weekly hospital visits. I can get my GED, start working, help with the bills. Mom had immediately protested, but not for the reasons I'd hoped. Oh, Alexis, you don't need to do that. You're so resourceful. I'm sure you'll find another way. Maybe apply for more scholarships or something. Meanwhile, Anna's private school tuition at Belmont Preparatory Academy, $28,000 per year, was never even discussed as a potential cut. She was 14 and, finding herself, through expensive art classes and European history courses, sending home Instagram photos from school trips to museums while I took a job at Riverside General Hospital as a file clerk. I handed over every paycheck to keep Dad alive. I watched my college dreams dissolve while Anna complained about how the school uniforms at Belmont were not flattering her figure. The irony wasn't lost on me that I turned out to be good at medicine, really good. The hospital administrators noticed how I organized files, how I asked intelligent questions when doctors discussed cases nearby, how I studied medical terminology in my downtime. Within 6 months, they'd moved me to the emergency department as a medical scribe. I worked night shifts, slept 4 hours, then attended community college classes during the day. By 19, I'd completed my prerequisites and was accepted into the accelerated nursing program at California State University. By 23, I had my BSN and was working as an ER nurse while applying to medical schools. The military made it possible. The Air Force Health Professions Scholarship Program covered my medical school tuition in exchange for service. 4 years at UC San Francisco School of Medicine, paid in full, with a stipend for living expenses. All I had to do was commit to serving as a military physician after graduation. It was the best decision I ever made, though my family would never understand why. By the time I was 30, I was Dr. Alexis Chen-Hartley, emergency medicine physician with a specialty in aerospace medicine. I'd completed my military commitment and stayed in the reserves, rising through the ranks while also maintaining a civilian position at Johns Hopkins. Dad lived to see me graduate from medical school. It was one of the proudest moments of his life, he'd told me, watching me walk across that stage in my white coat. He died 8 months later, never knowing the full extent of what I'd sacrificed to keep him alive those extra years. But here's what nobody in my family knew: those years in the Air Force had given me more than just medical training. They'd given me connections, security clearances, and command authority that people like my mother and sister couldn't begin to comprehend. After Dad's death, Anna came home from Belmont with a grand plan. She wanted to open an interior design studio in Napa Valley, capitalizing on the wine country's wealthy clientele who were always renovating their estates and tasting rooms. The only problem was she had no money, no business experience, and no actual portfolio of completed projects. She'd taken exactly 3 design courses at Belmont, done an internship at a furniture showroom in San Francisco, and decided she was ready to revolutionize California interior design. Alexis is so smart with money, Mom had said during that awful family dinner where they'd ambushed me. And you know how much she loves to help family. I'd written the check that night, $75,000, telling myself it was an investment in my sister's future, a way to honor Dad's memory by helping his youngest daughter pursue her dreams. Anna had been so grateful, hugging me tight and promising she'd pay me back with interest as soon as the business took off. "You're the best sister ever, Lexi. I promise I won't let you down. Hartley and Company." Interior design was an instant success. Anna had inherited Dad's charm and Mom's eye for aesthetics, and within 18 months, she had a client list that read like a who's who of Napa Valley society. The local business journal featured her as Napa's rising design star. She was invited to speak at entrepreneur conferences and design summits. And at her studio's 2-year anniversary party, when a reporter asked how she'd managed to start such a successful business so young, Anna had smiled that radiant smile of hers and said, "Pure determination and a lot of hard work. I did it all myself, really. Just believed in my vision and made it happen. Not one mention of my $75,000. Not one acknowledgement of the financial foundation that had made her dream possible. I'd stood there with my champagne glass, watching everyone congratulate my sister on her amazing self-made success, and felt more invisible than I'd ever felt in my life. Even when I became a decorated military officer, even when I was promoted to colonel at 32, the youngest in my division, even when I received commendations for my work in aerospace medicine research, I was still somehow the sister who didn't quite belong at their table. Mom would introduce me at social events as, "my daughter, the doctor," in the same tone someone might say, "my daughter, the accountant," or "my daughter who works in retail." Pleasant but unremarkable. Meanwhile, Anna was always, "my daughter, the interior designer," said with pride and elaboration about her latest high-profile project. The decision to keep my military rank and achievements secret from my family had been deliberate. I'd watched what happened when people knew you had resources. Suddenly you became everyone's solution to their problems. Every phone call came with an ulterior motive. Every family gathering turned into a pitch session. I'd already experienced that on a small scale with Anna's business loan. I had no interest in becoming the family's personal ATM or, worse, having my military position become something Mom could brag about at her country club lunches. So I'd created a carefully constructed fiction. As far as Mom and Anna knew, I was Dr. Alexis Chen-Hartley, emergency medicine physician at Johns Hopkins, making good money but nothing spectacular. I drove a nice but not ostentatious car, lived in an apartment I claimed to be renting, and was always vague about the details of my work. Meanwhile, I held a reserve commission as colonel in the United States Air Force with direct command authority over medical operations that spanned multiple bases. I conducted classified research on high-altitude physiology and emergency protocols for aerospace operations. I had security clearances that would make most people's heads spin. Last year, I'd been appointed Chief Medical Officer for the Aerospace Medicine Division's reserve component, a position that came with resources most civilians couldn't imagine, including priority access to military aircraft for medical emergencies and training operations. But to my family, I was just Alexis. The capable one. The one who didn't need attention or celebration. The one who could be invited to a wedding like a stranger and expected to smile and accept it. As I stood in that reception hall, watching Anna work the room like the social butterfly she'd always been, I thought about all those years of being overlooked. All those years of making excuses for them. All those years of convincing myself that if I just tried harder, loved them more, sacrificed more, they'd finally see me as worthy of their affection. Mom's hand on my arm tightened slightly as she concluded her warning about not making a scene. "This is Anastasia's day," she repeated. "Let's keep it that way, shall we?" I nodded, smiling that same compliant smile I'd perfected over 34 years. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that in exactly 43 minutes, during the cocktail hour when everyone would be relaxed and comfortable, I was going to show them exactly who Dr. Alexis Chen-Hartley really was. The ceremony was beautiful, I had to admit. Anna floated down the aisle like something out of a magazine, and Christopher looked genuinely smitten. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon flawlessly, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house when they exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Even I found myself getting emotional, remembering the little girl who used to play dress-up in Mom's old wedding dress. During the cocktail hour that followed, I nursed a glass of champagne and made polite conversation with the other guests at my table. They were nice enough people, Christopher's business school friends and their partners, all successful young professionals who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. For a brief moment, I almost forgot why I'd been dreading this day. It was exactly 43 minutes into the cocktail hour when I excused myself to find the restroom. The main powder room near the reception hall had a line of women waiting, so I wandered through the estate's elegant hallways until I found a smaller, more private bathroom tucked away near what looked like the vineyard's original wine cellar. The restroom was as luxurious as everything else at Meadowbrook: marble countertops, gold fixtures, lighting that was actually flattering. I touched up my lipstick and checked my hair, taking a moment to collect myself before heading back to face the rest of the evening. That's when I heard it, the distinct sound of a key turning in a lock from the outside. At first, I thought I'd imagined it. But when I tried the door handle, it wouldn't budge. I pressed my ear against the heavy wooden door and could hear footsteps retreating down the hallway outside. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice light. "I think the door is stuck. Could someone help me?" Silence. I tried the handle again, pushing against the door with my shoulder. Nothing. The door was definitely locked from the outside. My heart started to race as I realized this couldn't be an accident. You don't accidentally lock someone in a bathroom with a key from the outside. That's when my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my clutch, expecting maybe a work email or spam text. Instead, I saw a notification for a group message from something called Hartley Family. I'd never seen this group chat before. I wasn't even sure how I'd been added to it. The message was from Mom. Perfect. This is where she belongs. Out here is for real family only. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Below Mom's message, responses started appearing. "Anna, thank God." I was worried she'd find a way to ruin the photos. "Christopher, your mom is brilliant. How long should we leave her?" "Anna, at least until after dinner. Maybe longer." "Mom, she'll figure out how to get out eventually. She always does. Alexis is so resourceful." Face with tears of joy. There were laughing crying emojis. Actual emojis. They were laughing about this. I sank down onto the marble floor, my designer dress pooling around me. For 34 years, I'd told myself they loved me but just had a hard time showing it. That Mom's coldness was just her way of being practical. That Anna's self-centeredness was just immaturity she'd grow out of. That the constant feeling of being on the outside looking in was all in my head. But this wasn't in my head. This was deliberate. Calculated. Cruel. They'd planned this. While I'd been agonizing over whether to come to the wedding, while I'd been carefully choosing an outfit that wouldn't upstage the bride, while I'd been practicing gracious small talk in my bathroom mirror, they'd been plotting to lock me away like an embarrassing relative they didn't want the neighbors to see. The group chat kept pinging with new messages. Jokes about how I'd probably try to pick the lock. Speculation about whether I'd start banging on the door and make a scene. Someone, I think it was Christopher's mother, suggesting they should have just not invited me at all. But it was Anna's final message that broke something fundamental inside me. She's probably crying in there. Alexis always cries when she doesn't get her way. So dramatic. Face with rolling eyes. I wasn't crying. For the first time in my entire life, I wasn't crying when my family hurt me. Instead, I felt something I'd never experienced before, a white-hot rage that started in my chest and spread through my entire body like wildfire. All those years of making excuses for them. All those years of convincing myself that if I just tried harder, loved them more, sacrificed more, they'd finally see me as worthy of their affection. All those years of being the good daughter who never complained, never fought back, never demanded the respect I deserved. They thought I was weak. They thought I was pathetic. They thought I was someone they could lock away and forget about while they celebrated with their real family. They had no idea who they were dealing with. My hand stopped shaking as I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. I made one phone call. What happened in the next 20 minutes would change everything. The number I dialed was one that very few people had access to, a direct line that bypassed standard military protocols for urgent operational matters. It rang once before a crisp, professional voice answered. Operations Command, Lieutenant Colonel Brennan speaking. Brennan, this is Colonel Chen-Hartley. Authorization Code Delta 739 Tango. I need to initiate a Priority 2 training exercise under my medical command authority. There was a brief pause, not hesitation, but the kind of focused silence that comes when a military officer processes an unusual but legitimate request. Understood, Colonel. Specify parameters. I need 5 helicopters, medical transport configuration. Destination is Meadowbrook Estate Vineyard, Napa Valley, California. Coordinates are 38.4721 north, 122.3158 west. ETA 20 minutes from Travis Air Force Base. Colonel, that's a civilian location. Can you confirm this is for authorized training purposes? Confirmed. I'm conducting a field assessment of emergency medical evacuation protocols in wine country terrain. The estate owners have been informed. The lie came easily. They'd be informed soon enough when 5 military helicopters appeared overhead. This falls under my authority as Chief Medical Officer for Training Operations. Understood, ma'am. Initiating now. 5 birds, medical transport config, 20-minute ETA to specified coordinates. Anything else? Full protocol approach. I want rotors audible from 2 miles out. And Brennan, make it impressive. Yes, ma'am. We'll make it memorable. I ended the call and leaned back against the marble wall, a smile playing at the corners of my mouth for the first time all evening. My family thought they knew who Dr. Alexis Chen-Hartley was. They thought I was the struggling physician who'd never quite lived up to her potential. They had no idea that the doctor work, I was always too busy with included commanding military medical operations across the western United States. They had no idea that I held security clearances that gave me access to resources most people only saw in movies. They had no idea that my modest lifestyle wasn't about lack of money, it was about operational security and not drawing unnecessary attention to capabilities I preferred to keep quiet. The decision to keep my military career largely secret from my family had been strategic. After Anna's business loan debacle, where she'd taken my money and erased me from her success story, I'd realized something important. My family didn't value what I actually accomplished. They valued the narrative they'd constructed about me, the capable, resilient daughter who didn't need recognition because she was just so naturally self-sufficient. Telling them I was a colonel in the Air Force would have changed nothing except to make me a more valuable resource to exploit. Mom would have bragged about it at her country club while still treating me like an afterthought. Anna would have found ways to leverage my military connections for her business. And I would still be locked in bathrooms at family events. So I'd built a parallel life. To them, I was just a doctor with a demanding schedule. To the Air Force, I was Colonel Chen-Hartley, a decorated officer with expertise in aerospace medicine and emergency response protocols. To my colleagues at Johns Hopkins, I was both, a physician who disappeared one weekend a month for reserve duty and occasionally had to decline social invitations because of military obligations, she didn't elaborate on. The beauty of reserve service was that it gave me all the authority and access of active duty without the constant visibility. I could move between my civilian and military world seamlessly, and nobody in either sphere fully understood the scope of what I did in the other. My specialty in aerospace medicine had started almost by accident. During my residency, I'd become fascinated by the physiological challenges of high-altitude flight, how the human body adapted to rapid pressure changes, how to treat decompression sickness, how to keep pilots conscious during high-G maneuvers. The Air Force had been thrilled to have a physician who actually wanted to work on these problems. Over the years, I developed protocols for emergency medical evacuations from remote locations, trained combat medics on trauma care under extreme conditions, and consulted on the medical aspects of pilot training programs. My research on hypoxia recognition had been published in military medical journals and had changed how the Air Force approached altitude chamber training. But more relevant to my current situation, I had command authority over medical training operations within my region. Which meant I could authorize helicopter deployment for training exercises as long as they fell under the broad umbrella of emergency medical preparedness. And what better training scenario than practicing emergency evacuations from challenging terrain like a hillside vineyard estate? The fact that this particular training exercise would also serve as the most dramatic entrance I'd ever make was just a convenient coincidence. Through the bathroom window, small, but positioned high enough to offer a view of the grounds, I could already hear something in the distance. A low rhythmic thumping that was growing steadily louder. The distinctive sound of rotor blades cutting through air. 17 minutes. Brennan had beaten the ETA by 3 minutes. The sound grew from distant thunder to an unmistakable mechanical roar. I could picture what was happening outside, 300 wedding guests in the middle of their cocktail hour, suddenly becoming aware of an approaching sound that didn't belong in their carefully curated celebration. The first helicopter appeared over the ridge to the east, a UH-60 Black Hawk in military gray, its rotors creating that characteristic whoop-whoop-whoop that could be heard for miles. It banked gracefully, circling the estate once in a wide arc that let everyone get a good look at it. Then came the second. And the third. And the fourth. And the fifth. 5 Black Hawks in perfect formation, circling the Meadowbrook estate like they owned the sky. The rotor wash from 5 helicopters created winds strong enough to bend trees and send napkins and programs flying across the outdoor cocktail area. Through the bathroom door, which was thick but not soundproof, I could hear chaos erupting in the reception hall. Shouting. Confusion. The string quartet stopping mid-song. Glass breaking as someone dropped a champagne flute. What the hell is that? Are those military helicopters? Is this some kind of attack? Oh my God, look at them. There are 5 of them. Why are they circling us? Someone call the police. Are we in danger? I pressed my ear against the door, listening to the beautiful symphony of panic. The helicopters continued their slow circle, maintaining formation, their presence absolutely dominating the airspace above the vineyard. Impossible to ignore. Impossible to dismiss. Then, with practiced precision, they began their descent. The lead helicopter touched down first on the estate's main lawn, the area usually reserved for wedding photos against the backdrop of rolling vineyards. Its landing gear compressed slightly as it settled onto the manicured grass. The pilot kept the rotors at operational speed, loud enough to be heard clearly, but not enough to damage anything. The other 4 helicopters landed in perfect sequence, forming a semicircle that faced the main reception area. 5 Black Hawks, sitting on a California vineyard's lawn like they'd done this 1,000 times before. The effect was exactly what I'd hoped for, complete and utter disruption of Anna's perfect fairy tale wedding. I could hear feet running in the hallway outside the bathroom. Staff members shouting to each other. Someone trying to find whoever was in charge. The estate manager's voice rising above the chaos, demanding to know who authorized military aircraft to land on his property. This is a private event. Someone needs to explain what's happening right now. Through it all, the helicopters sat there, rotors still spinning, a display of power and authority that couldn't be argued with or dismissed. They weren't asking permission. They weren't apologizing. They were simply there, commanding attention by their mere presence. I gave it another minute, letting the chaos build, letting the confusion and fear reach its peak. Letting my mother and sister and 300 guests scramble to understand what was happening to their perfect celebration. Then I heard it, the sound I'd been waiting for. A key turning in the bathroom door lock. The door opened to reveal a panicked staff member, a young woman in the estate's uniform who looked like she'd been sent to check every room in the building. "Oh, thank God," she said breathlessly. "Ma'am, you need to evacuate immediately. There's some kind of military situation happening and we're trying to get everyone to safety." "Thank you," I said calmly, stepping past her into the hallway. "But I don't think evacuation will be necessary." I walked back toward the reception hall with measured steps, my heels clicking on the hardwood floors. Not hurrying. Not running. Just walking with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what was happening and why. As I approached the main hall, I could see the scene I'd created, 300 guests pressed against the windows, staring out at the 5 helicopters sitting on the lawn. Staff members running in circles, trying to figure out protocol for a situation that wasn't in any manual. Christopher's family looking terrified. The vineyard manager shouting into a phone, probably to his insurance company. And there, in the center of the chaos, stood my mother and Anna. Mom's face had gone pale, all her careful composure evaporated. Anna was gripping Christopher's arms so tightly her knuckles were white, her perfect wedding day dissolving into confusion and fear. That's when the helicopter's doors opened in unison. From each aircraft, 2 flight medics emerged, dressed in full military medical gear. They didn't run or rush, they simply stood at attention beside their aircraft, waiting. The crowd's panic intensified. People started genuinely believing this was some kind of emergency, that something terrible was about to happen. The estate manager was now physically pushing his way toward the helicopters, probably planning to demand they leave immediately. That's when I stepped out onto the terrace that overlooked the lawn. And I spoke, my voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the disruption to this lovely celebration. Every head turned toward me. 300 pairs of eyes suddenly focused on the woman they'd barely noticed an hour ago. For those who don't know me, my name is Colonel Alexis Chen-Hartley, United States Air Force, Chief Medical Officer for the Aerospace Medicine Division Reserve Component. I'm also, I paused, letting the words hang in the air, the bride's sister. The silence was absolute. Even the helicopter's rotors seemed to quiet slightly, though I knew that was just my imagination. I watched as Mom's face went from pale to green, as understanding dawned about exactly who she'd locked in that bathroom. As Anna's mouth fell open, her perfect wedding day facade cracking like thin ice. These helicopters are here as part of a training exercise I authorized, I continued, my voice calm and professional. We're conducting emergency medical evacuation assessments in challenging terrain. My team and I appreciate the Meadowbrook Estate's cooperation in this important military training operation. I let that sink in for a moment, the implication that the estate had cooperated, that this was all official and authorized, even though the manager was clearly hearing about it for the first time. However, since we're all here together, and since this is such a special family occasion, I thought this might be an appropriate time to share some wonderful news with everyone. I descended the terrace steps slowly, walking toward where my mother and sister stood frozen in place. You see, many of you may not know that I serve our country as a colonel in the United States Air Force. It's not something I talk about much, operational security and all that. But I'm very proud of my service, just as I'm sure my family is proud of me. The lie tasted sweet on my tongue. Mom looked like she might faint. And I'm so grateful to be here today, celebrating my sister's wedding, surrounded by family who values and respects me. Another lie, but this one had teeth. I was now standing directly in front of Anna, close enough that only she and Mom and Christopher could hear my next words. Did you enjoy the group chat? I asked quietly. The one where you discussed which bathroom would be best for locking me in? Anna's eyes went wide. Christopher looked confused. Mom seemed to be having trouble breathing. Because I have to tell you, I continued, still speaking softly, it was fascinating to read. Really gave me insight into what my family actually thinks of me. What you've always thought of me. I pulled out my phone and held it up so they could see the screen, the family group chat, still open, still showing their cruel messages. The thing is, I said, raising my voice now so nearby guests could hear, when you lock a colonel in the bathroom at a wedding, she has certain resources at her disposal that you might not have anticipated. I gestured toward the helicopters, where my medical team still stood at attention. Now, I could have just picked the lock. Used my military training to open that door and walk out quietly, like you expected. But I thought to myself, why be quiet? Why keep pretending that everything is fine? Why keep protecting people who see me as something to be hidden away? The guests closest to us were definitely listening now, though pretending not to. The story of what was happening here would spread through their social circles within hours. So instead, I made a phone call. One phone call. And 20 minutes later, 5 United States Air Force helicopters landed on this lawn. Because that's what happens when you underestimate someone. That's what happens when you spend 34 years treating someone like they don't matter. I looked directly at Mom, then at Anna, letting them see the woman they'd never bothered to truly know. I'm done being the sister you lock away. I'm done being the daughter you dismiss. I'm done making excuses for people who see my love as weakness and my sacrifice as obligation. Around us, more guests were openly watching now. This wasn't a private confrontation anymore, it was a public reckoning. And I wanted it that way. Anna found her voice finally, though it came out as a strangled whisper. Lexi, please, you're ruining my wedding. No, I interrupted firmly. You ruined your wedding when you decided to lock your sister in a bathroom like a prisoner. I'm just making sure everyone knows what kind of people they're celebrating today. I turned to address the broader crowd, my voice strong and clear. I want to thank everyone for being here today to witness true family values in action. And I especially want to thank my mother and sister for teaching me the most important lesson of my life. I paused, letting the anticipation build. They taught me that sometimes, the family you're born into isn't your real family at all. Sometimes your real family is the one you choose. The one that actually values you. The one that would never lock you in a bathroom and laugh about it. The whispers had started now, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. People pulling out their phones, undoubtedly recording or texting. This moment would be documented, shared, remembered. Mom finally found her voice, though it came out weak and desperate. Alexis, sweetie, this is all a misunderstanding. Is it? I pulled up the group chat again and held my phone high enough for several guests to see. Because these messages seem pretty clear to me. This is where she belongs. Out here is for real family only. Those were your exact words, Mother. Several guests gasped. Others were definitely recording now. Anna was crying, her perfect makeup starting to run. Christopher looked like he wanted to disappear. Mom was opening and closing her mouth like a fish, unable to find words that could possibly salvage this situation. And I felt free. For the first time in 34 years, I felt completely, utterly free. I turned away from them and walked back toward the terrace, then paused and looked back one more time. Oh, and Anna? Consider this my wedding gift to you, the truth. Because someone in this family should finally tell it. Then I walked to the lead helicopter, where my team leader saluted me. Exercise complete, he asked quietly. Exercise complete, I confirmed. Let's head home. As I climbed into the helicopter, I could see the crowd below, frozen, shocked, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. 5 military helicopters. A locked bathroom. A family's secrets exposed. The rotors increased speed, and we lifted off, leaving Meadowbrook Estate Vineyard and its stunned guests behind. But this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The flight back to Travis Air Force Base took 38 minutes. I sat in the jump seat of the lead helicopter, headset on, watching the California landscape pass beneath us as we flew northeast from Napa Valley. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if I'd been in the mood to appreciate them. Instead, I was processing what I'd just done. The radio crackled. Colonel, this is Captain Hayes from Bird 3. Permission to speak freely? I clicked my mic. Granted, Captain. Ma'am, I don't know what that was about back there, but that was the most epic family intervention I've ever witnessed. The crew is already saying this'll be a legendary story. Despite everything, I smiled. Let's keep the legendary stories to a minimum, Captain. This was a legitimate training exercise in emergency response coordination. Of course, ma'am. A very loud, very dramatic training exercise that happened to coincide with someone needing to make a point at a wedding. Captain Hayes, are you suggesting I used military resources for personal reasons? There was a pause, then, no ma'am. Just suggesting that you're the most badass medical officer in the reserve component. Carry on, Captain. I clicked off, but the smile lingered. My team had performed flawlessly, professional, disciplined, and yes, dramatic enough to make an impact that wouldn't be forgotten. The after-action report I'd have to file would be interesting to write, but everything I'd done was within my authority as long as I framed it correctly. Training exercise. Emergency response coordination. Assessment of evacuation protocols in challenging terrain. All technically true, even if the primary purpose had been to shatter my family's perfect facade. When we landed at Travis, I thanked my crews personally, shaking hands with each pilot and medic. They'd given up their Saturday evening for what they thought was a routine training mission and ended up as supporting players in what was probably the most dramatic wedding disruption in Napa Valley history. "Colonel," Lieutenant Brennan approached as I was heading to my vehicle. "I took the liberty of preparing a preliminary after-action framework for you. Figured you might need documentation for the exercise." I took the tablet he offered. He'd outlined everything in proper military format: objectives, execution, outcomes, areas for improvement. It was perfectly bureaucratic and completely defensible. "Brennan, you're a lifesaver. Just covering our asses, ma'am. With respect." He grinned. Though I have to say, in 15 years of military service, I've never seen anyone use a training exercise quite like that. Whatever was happening at that wedding, I hope it was worth it. "It was," I said simply. "Trust me, it was." I drove back to my apartment in Sacramento, the place I kept for reserve duty weekends, in silence, my mind racing through what would happen next. The immediate satisfaction of the helicopter arrival was fading, replaced by the reality of what I'd set in motion. By the time I pulled into my parking space, my phone had 63 missed calls and over 100 text messages. I'd silenced it during the flight, knowing what awaited me. Most were from numbers I didn't recognize, probably wedding guests who'd somehow gotten my contact information and wanted to hear the full story. Several were from Mom, progressing from angry to desperate to pleading. A few were from Anna, mostly variations on, "How could you do this to me?" But one message caught my attention. It was from a number I didn't immediately recognize, sent 20 minutes after the helicopters had departed. "Dr. Chen-Hartley, this is Richard Castellano, attorney for the Rothwell family. We need to discuss what happened at the wedding. Please call me at your earliest convenience. This is time sensitive." The Rothwells. Christopher's family. Old California money, the kind of people who had lawyers on retainer for situations exactly like this. I called the number. Richard Castellano answered immediately. His voice was smooth, professional, the kind of carefully modulated tone that came from decades of high-stakes negotiations. "Dr. Chen-Hartley, thank you for calling back so promptly. I imagine you know why I'm reaching out. I assume the Rothwell family has concerns about this afternoon's events." "Concerns is putting it mildly. You disrupted a wedding attended by some of California's most prominent citizens. You used military aircraft to make what appears to be a personal statement. And you publicly humiliated your family in front of 300 witnesses, many of whom recorded the entire incident. Mr. Castellano, everything I did was within my authority as a military officer conducting a training exercise. If the timing was inconvenient, I apologize, but emergency preparedness doesn't operate on a social calendar." There was a pause. Then, "Doctor, I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling because the Rothwell family wants to understand what happened. And more importantly, they want to know what else might be coming." That surprised me. "What else?" "Come now, Dr. Chen-Hartley. You don't make that kind of dramatic statement without having more ammunition. The helicopters were an opening salvo, not a final blow. So I'll ask directly, what do you want?" I sat down on my apartment's small balcony, looking out at the Sacramento skyline. What did I want? "Mr. Castellano, I want my family to understand that I'm not someone who can be locked away and forgotten. I want them to feel a fraction of what they've made me feel for 34 years. And I want them to know that their actions have consequences." "I see. And you plan to accomplish this how?" "That depends entirely on them." Another pause. "Dr. Chen-Hartley, may I speak candidly?" "Please." The Rothwell family is horrified by what they learned today. They had no idea that Diane and Anastasia Hartley were capable of treating a family member with such cruelty. Locking you in a bathroom, discussing it in a group chat, deliberately excluding you from family events. These aren't the actions of the kind of people the Rothwells associate with. I felt a small surge of satisfaction. I'm glad someone recognizes that. However, they're also concerned about their son. Christopher married into your family today, and now he's connected to this situation whether he wants to be or not. So here's what I'm authorized to offer. The Rothwell family will remain neutral in whatever conflict is unfolding between you and the Hartleys. They won't defend Diane or Anastasia's actions. But they also ask that you don't drag Christopher further into this than necessary. Christopher participated in locking me in that bathroom, Mr. Castellano. He's not innocent. He was following his new wife's lead on what he thought was a minor family drama. He didn't understand the history. And for what it's worth, he's now questioning whether he married into a family that aligns with his values. That stopped me. He's questioning his marriage? Let's just say that the Rothwell family is having serious conversations with their son about what he learned today. But that's their business. My question is, are you planning further action? I thought about the group chat messages still on my phone. About the decades of receipts I had, emails, text messages, financial records showing every loan I'd given that was never repaid, every promise that was broken, every instance of being treated like I didn't matter. Mr. Castellano, I haven't decided what comes next. But I can promise you this, everything I do will be truth-based and proportional. I'm not interested in destroying my family. I'm interested in making sure they can't keep treating people this way. Fair enough. And Dr. Chen-Hartley? For what it's worth, what you did today took courage. Not many people would stand up to family like that, especially so publicly. The Rothwells respect that, even if they wish it hadn't happened at their son's wedding. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony for a long time, watching the city lights come on as darkness fell. The adrenaline from the confrontation was wearing off, replaced by a strange mixture of satisfaction and uncertainty. I'd done it. I'd stood up to them. I'd shown them, and 300 witnesses, that I wasn't someone who could be dismissed and forgotten. The helicopters had been impossible to ignore, impossible to explain away, impossible to pretend hadn't happened. But now what? My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from a number I recognized, Evelyn Park, my closest friend from medical school who now worked at UCSF. Girl. Please tell me the videos I'm seeing online are actually you. Did you really land 5 helicopters at your sister's wedding? Because if so, you're officially my hero. Videos. Of course there were videos. In an age where everyone had a camera in their pocket, my dramatic arrival had probably been captured from dozens of angles. I opened Instagram and searched for Meadowbrook Estate. The hashtag Meadowbrook Wedding was trending locally. Dozens of posts showed the helicopters from various angles, circling the venue, landing on the lawn, sitting in formation while I gave my speech. Some posts were sympathetic, can't believe they locked her in a bathroom at her own sister's wedding. She had every right to make an entrance. Others were critical, using military resources for personal drama. This seems really inappropriate. Many were just shocked. I've been to 100 weddings and nothing like this has ever happened. 5 helicopters. This is insane. But what caught my attention was a video posted by someone named Jennifer Huang, one of Anna's design clients who'd apparently been at the wedding. The video showed the moment I'd revealed the group chat messages, and Jennifer had added a caption. When you treat someone like garbage and forget they have receipts and helicopters. The Hartley sisters are done. Hashtag family drama, hashtag justice served, hashtag Napa wedding. The video had been viewed over 50,000 times in 3 hours. My phone rang. This time it was Evelyn calling directly. Lexi. Oh my God, you have to tell me everything. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out. Despite everything, I laughed. Ev, it's complicated. Complicated? You landed 5 military helicopters at a wedding and called out your family in front of everyone they know. That's not complicated, that's legendary. What happened? So I told her. All of it. The bathroom lock-in, the group chat, the years of being treated like I didn't matter, the decision to use my military authority to make a statement that couldn't be ignored. Evelyn listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. When I finished, there was a long silence. Lexi, she said finally, I've known you for 12 years. I've watched you work 30-hour shifts, perform emergency surgery in conditions that would make most doctors quit, and maintain your composure through situations that would break most people. But I've never been more proud of you than I am right now. Really? Even though I might have crossed some ethical lines with the helicopter thing? Screw ethics. Sometimes you have to make noise to be heard. And you made noise that will echo for years. We talked for another hour, Evelyn helping me process everything that had happened and what might come next. She was the kind of friend who would support me even if I was wrong, but would also tell me when I was being unreasonable. Tonight, she just listened and validated. When we finally hung up, I felt more grounded. What I'd done was dramatic, maybe even excessive, but it wasn't wrong. I'd spent 34 years being quiet, being accommodating, being the daughter who never made waves. Today I'd made a tsunami. The question was, what would the aftermath look like? I didn't have to wait long to find out. The next morning, I woke to find my phone exploding with notifications. Overnight, the story had spread beyond local social media to regional news outlets. Apparently, a slow news Sunday combined with dramatic wedding videos was irresistible to journalists. Military officer disrupts sister's wedding with helicopter display, read one headline. Family feud goes airborne, doctor uses military resources to confront relatives, read another. But the most widely shared article came from a San Francisco lifestyle blogger named Samantha Torres, who'd somehow gotten the full story and written a piece titled, "The Locked Bathroom, the Group Chat, and the Helicopters, When Family Cruelty Gets the Response It Deserves." Samantha had interviewed several wedding guests who'd witnessed everything. She'd obtained screenshots of the group chat messages I'd displayed. She'd even tracked down the estate manager, who confirmed that the helicopters had arrived without warning and that the wedding couple's family had indeed been keeping one member separated from guests during the cocktail hour. The article presented me as a sympathetic figure, a successful doctor and military officer who'd been systematically mistreated by her family for decades and had finally fought back in the most dramatic way possible. It included details about how I'd supported Anna's business, how I'd been excluded from family events, how I'd been treated as less important than my younger sister despite my accomplishments. The comments section was overwhelmingly supportive. Good for her. Families like this need to be called out publicly. I had a similar situation with my relatives. Wish I'd had helicopters. The group chat messages are the worst part. They were literally laughing about locking her up. She was right to expose them. But there were also critical voices. Using military resources for personal grievances is an abuse of authority. She could have handled this privately. Making a scene at a wedding is immature. Both sides are wrong here. Family drama should stay private. I was still reading comments when my phone rang with a call from a D.C. area code. Lieutenant General Patricia Vance, my commanding officer in the reserve structure. My stomach dropped. This was the call I'd been dreading. Colonel Chen-Hartley, General Vance's voice was crisp and professional. I believe we need to discuss yesterday's training exercise in Napa Valley. I'm sure you've seen that it's attracted some media attention. Yes, ma'am. I'm prepared to provide a full after-action report. I'm sure you are. But first, I want to hear your version of events. Not the official report, not the bureaucratic justification. I want to know what actually happened and why. So I told her. Everything. The bathroom, the group chat, the decision to use my authority to make a point that couldn't be ignored. I didn't try to hide behind military protocol or training exercise justifications. I just told her the truth. When I finished, there was a long silence. Colonel, General Vance said finally, what you did was technically within your authority. Emergency preparedness training can be conducted in various locations, and you had legitimate command authority to deploy those aircraft. I started to relax slightly. However, she continued, the optics of using military resources during a personal family conflict are problematic. It creates the appearance of abuse of authority, even if the actual actions were legal. I understand, ma'am. That said, and here her voice softened slightly, I read the article about what your family did to you. The group chat messages. The pattern of exclusion. And I want you to know that I would have been tempted to do exactly the same thing in your position. I was so surprised I almost dropped the phone. You would? Colonel, I've spent 33 years in the Air Force. I've commanded squadrons, managed crises, and dealt with situations that would break most people. But I've also dealt with a family that never quite understood or respected my service. So when I see someone using the authority they've earned to stand up against people who've spent decades diminishing them, part of me applauds that courage. But we still need to manage the fallout. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to write the most detailed, comprehensive after-action report of your career. You're going to document every training objective, every safety protocol, every legitimate military purpose for that exercise. You're going to make it so airtight that nobody can question whether it was authorized. Yes, ma'am. And then you're going to lay low for a while. No more dramatic demonstrations. No more public confrontations. You've made your point. Now you need to let the dust settle and see what comes next. Understood, ma'am. Good. And Colonel? Off the record? Yes, ma'am. Those helicopters must have been absolutely magnificent. 5 Black Hawks in formation over a vineyard wedding? That's an entrance nobody will ever forget. After the call ended, I sat staring at my phone in wonder. My commanding officer had essentially given me a slap on the wrist while privately admitting she would have done the same thing. The afternoon brought more calls, journalists wanting interviews, wedding guests wanting to share their perspectives, even a few people I barely knew reaching out to say they admired what I'd done. But the call that mattered most came from a number in Napa Valley. A number I recognized but hadn't expected to hear from, Christopher Rothwell. Dr. Chen-Hartley, this is Christopher. I need to apologize to you. I said nothing, letting him continue. I didn't know. Anna told me you two had a complicated relationship, but she made it sound like typical sister stuff. Competition, minor disagreements. She never told me about locking you in the bathroom. When Diane, suggested it, Anna made it seem like a practical solution to avoid drama. I went along with it because I trusted my wife. But what you showed everyone yesterday, those group chat messages, the way they talked about you. His voice cracked slightly. That wasn't sister drama. That was cruelty. And I participated in it. I'm so sorry. Christopher, I said finally, I appreciate the apology. But you married into a family without understanding who they really were. Now you know. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know yet, he admitted. My parents are suggesting an annulment. They're horrified by what they saw. But Anna is my wife, and marriage is supposed to be for better or worse. Even when worse includes deliberately cruel treatment of family members? Silence. Think about it, Christopher. Think about what kind of person laughs about locking their sister in a bathroom. Think about what kind of family creates a group chat specifically to mock someone they claim to love. And then ask yourself if those are the values you want to build a life around. After we hung up, I realized something. The helicopters hadn't just been about making a dramatic statement. They'd been about forcing everyone, my family, the wedding guests, even people who barely knew me, to see the truth about what had been happening behind closed doors. I'd been invisible for 34 years. Now, for better or worse, I was impossible to ignore. And whatever came next, I was ready for it. The evidence began arriving in my inbox within 48 hours of the helicopter incident. The first email came from someone named Patricia Delgado, a woman I'd never met who identified herself as a former client of Anna's interior design business. The subject line read, "You deserve to know the truth about your sister. Dr. Chen-Hartley. I was at the wedding on Saturday. I saw what happened with the helicopters and heard what you said about how your family has treated you. I need to tell you something about your sister that I think you should know. 2 years ago, I hired Hartley and Company to redesign my home in St. Helena. Anastasia quoted me $85,000 for the project. I paid half up front as a deposit, $42,500. She promised the work would be completed in 3 months. 6 months later, nothing had been done. When I tried to contact her, she stopped returning my calls. Eventually I had to hire a lawyer to get my deposit back. During the legal proceedings, we discovered that Anna had taken deposits from 7 other clients during the same period and hadn't completed any of the projects. The court ruled in my favor, but by then Hartley and Company had declared bankruptcy. I never recovered my money. I later learned that Anna had used client deposits to fund her personal lifestyle, expensive vacations, designer clothes, a new car. I'm telling you this because after what I witnessed at the wedding, I realized you probably paid for her business to start. And I thought you should know what she did with the opportunity you gave her. I have all the court documents if you want them. Patricia Delgado. I sat staring at the email for several minutes. Anna's business had failed? She declared bankruptcy? But that was impossible. I'd seen recent social media posts showing Hartley and Company projects, client testimonials, magazine features. Or had I? When was the last time I'd actually verified that Anna's business was operational? I clicked through to Anna's Instagram account. The most recent post was from 8 months ago, a photo of a completed dining room with the caption, "Another satisfied client." But looking more carefully, I noticed the comments had been turned off. And when I searched for Hartley and Company's business website, I got a "domain expired" message. My sister's successful interior design business, the one I'd funded with $75,000, the one she'd claimed proved she could make it on her own, had apparently collapsed over a year ago. And she'd never told me. The second email arrived an hour later, this one from someone named Robert Chen, no relation to me despite the shared surname. He'd also been at the wedding. Dr. Chen-Hartley. I'm a forensic accountant in San Francisco, and I happened to be at the Rothwell-Hartley wedding as a guest of Christopher's family. After witnessing the incident with the helicopters and hearing about the family dynamics, something bothered me enough that I did some research over the weekend. Your mother, Diane Hartley, was appointed executor of your father's estate when he passed away 6 years ago. According to public probate records, the estate was valued at approximately $2.3 million, including life insurance, retirement accounts, and the family home. According to the will that was filed, you were left $50,000 and some personal effects. Your sister Anastasia was left $100,000. The remainder went to your mother. However, I found something unusual. There were 2 versions of the will filed within 6 months of each other. The first version, dated 2 years before your father's death, left the estate split evenly between you and your sister, with your mother receiving the house and a modest living allowance. The second version, dated 6 months before his death, is the one that was probated, the one that gave most of the estate to your mother. I can't prove anything improper happened, but the timing is suspicious. If your father was seriously ill 6 months before his death, he may not have been in a position to make sound decisions about changing his will. And if someone else influenced that change? I'm attaching copies of both versions from public records. I thought you should have them. Robert Chen, CPA, CFE. I opened the attachments with shaking hands. 2 wills, both bearing my father's signature, but radically different in their provisions. In the first will, dated 4 years before Dad's death when he was still healthy, everything was clear, assets split evenly between his daughters, with provisions that if either of us predeceased him, our share would go to our children. It was fair, logical, exactly what I would have expected from my father. The second will, dated just months before his death when the cancer had spread to his brain and he was heavily medicated, told a very different story. Most of the estate to Mom. A token amount to me. Slightly more to Anna. I remembered those final months. Dad had been confused, disoriented from the pain medication and the tumor pressing on his brain. He'd sometimes forgotten who we were, called Mom by his own mother's name, asked about people who'd been dead for decades. Had he really changed his will during that time? Or had someone changed it for him? The third email came from someone named Dr. James Whitmore, who identified himself as Dad's oncologist. Dr. Chen-Hartley. I heard about the incident at your sister's wedding through mutual acquaintances. I need to tell you something that has troubled me for 6 years. 3 months before your father passed away, your mother brought him to my office and asked me to sign documents stating that he was of sound mind and capable of making legal decisions. She said he needed to update some financial matters. I refused. Your father's brain tumor had significantly impacted his cognitive function by that point. He was experiencing confusion, memory loss, and impaired judgment. I told your mother explicitly that he was not capable of making major legal decisions and that any documents he signed during that period could be challenged. She became very angry with me and switched his care to another oncologist for his final months. I always wondered what documents she was trying to get him to sign. If you need my professional opinion about your father's mental capacity during his final months, I'm willing to provide it. Dr. James Whitmore, MD. The pieces were falling into place like a puzzle I'd been avoiding for 6 years. The changed will. Mom's sudden wealth. The way she'd been so eager to have Dad's estate settled quickly, discouraging me from reviewing the documents carefully because I was too emotional to deal with legal matters so soon after his death. I'd trusted her. I'd believed that Dad had chosen to leave me less because why? Because I was more capable? Because I didn't need the money as much? I'd never actually questioned it, just accepted the pain and tried to move on. But what if the will I'd seen wasn't the one Dad actually wanted? What if Mom had manipulated a dying man's final wishes to enrich herself? My phone rang. It was a local number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Dr. Chen-Hartley? This is Laura Fitzgerald. I'm an attorney specializing in estate disputes and elder financial abuse. I was at the wedding on Saturday. My husband is Christopher's college roommate. After what I witnessed, I did some digging into your family's situation. I think we should talk. We met the next day at a coffee shop in Berkeley, halfway between Sacramento and San Francisco. Laura Fitzgerald was in her 50s, with sharp eyes and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent decades fighting court battles. I'm going to be direct, she said after we'd ordered coffee. Your father's will was almost certainly changed under suspicious circumstances. A man with advanced brain cancer, heavily medicated, experiencing documented cognitive impairment, suddenly changes his will to heavily favor his wife over his children? That screams undue influence. But it's been 6 years, I said. Isn't there a statute of limitations? For criminal fraud, yes. For civil estate disputes, the timeline is more complex. But here's what concerns me more. If your mother was willing to manipulate your father's will, what else has she done? You mentioned you loaned your sister $75,000 for her business. Did she ever repay you? No. She said the business needed time to become profitable. Did you get that loan in writing? With repayment terms? I shook my head. It was family. I trusted her. Laura's expression was sympathetic but firm. Dr. Chen-Hartley, I've handled dozens of cases like this. Families where one member is designated as the strong one or the capable one, and that designation is used to justify taking advantage of them financially. You've been systematically exploited by your mother and sister for years, and the will modification was just the most egregious example. She pulled out a folder. I took the liberty of doing some preliminary research. Your sister's business received your $75,000, then took deposits from multiple clients totaling over $200,000, then declared bankruptcy claiming the business had failed due to market conditions. But the bankruptcy filing shows almost no business assets. Where did all that money go? I don't know. I do. It went to fund your sister's lifestyle. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, expensive car leases. She was running what's essentially a Ponzi scheme, taking new client deposits to pay for personal expenses, never actually intending to complete the work. And she learned that behavior from somewhere. Laura leaned forward. Your mother received approximately $2 million from your father's estate. According to public records, she's burned through most of it in 6 years. Expensive condo, luxury cars, country club memberships, extensive travel. She's been living like she's independently wealthy when in reality, she's been spending money that should have been split with you and your sister. The anger I'd felt at the wedding was nothing compared to what I felt now. This wasn't just about being excluded from family events or locked in a bathroom. This was systematic financial exploitation spanning years. What can I do about it? I asked. That depends on what you want. Do you want justice? Do you want your money back? Do you want to expose them? Or do you just want to make sure they can't hurt anyone else? I thought about Patricia Delgado, who'd lost $42,000 to my sister's scheme. I thought about the other clients Anna had defrauded. I thought about Dad, confused and dying, possibly signing away his true wishes because Mom manipulated him in his weakest moment. I want all of it, I said. Justice, exposure, restitution. I want everyone to know what they've done. Laura smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who'd just been given permission to do what she did best. Then let's build a case. Over the next week, evidence continued to accumulate. Former clients of Anna's came forward with stories of paid deposits and unfinished work. Neighbors of my parents reported that Dad had been noticeably confused and disoriented in his final months, often not recognizing people or understanding where he was. Most damning was a recording that Dr. Whitmore had kept, a voicemail from Mom, left the day after he'd refused to sign the competency documents, threatening to make sure no other patients came to him if he continued to interfere in family matters. That's witness intimidation, Laura said when I played it for her. And it suggests consciousness of guilt. She knew what she was doing was wrong, and she was trying to eliminate anyone who might challenge it. We also discovered that Mom had been the one to bring Dad to a different attorney, not his longtime lawyer who knew him well, but a newly licensed attorney in a different county who'd never met Dad before and had no baseline for his cognitive state. That attorney, when Laura tracked him down, admitted he'd been uncomfortable with the meeting. The client seemed confused, he said in a recorded phone call. He kept asking why he was there. His wife did most of the talking. But she insisted he wanted to change his will, and he did eventually sign the documents. I probably should have questioned it more, but I was new to practice and didn't want to lose a client. The pattern was clear. Mom had deliberately taken Dad to someone inexperienced who wouldn't question the situation. She'd coached him through signing documents he probably didn't understand. And she'd threatened anyone who tried to interfere. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Anna herself. Christopher called me 11 days after the wedding. His voice was strained, exhausted. Alexis, I need to give you something. Anna doesn't know I have it, and if she finds out I shared it with you, well, it doesn't matter anymore. You need to see this. He sent me a video file. When I opened it, I saw Anna sitting in what looked like their home office, talking on the phone. The date stamp showed it was from 2 weeks before the wedding. Mom, I'm telling you, we can't have her there, Anna was saying to someone on the other end. Every time Alexis is around, people start asking questions. Questions about Dad's will, questions about my business, questions about where the money went. She's too smart. She'll figure things out eventually. A pause while she listened. I don't care if it looks bad. Tell her she wasn't invited. Tell her anything. Just keep her away from the wedding. Christopher's family has money, real money, and I can't have them learning about everything. Another pause. The bankruptcy was 2 years ago, Mom. People forget. But if Alexis starts digging, if she starts asking Christopher's family for financial advice or legal help, everything comes out. Everything. Including what you did with Dad's will. My heart was pounding as I listened. Look, I know we used her money to start the business. And yes, I know we were supposed to pay her back. But we can't, okay? There's nothing left. And if she finds out that you also. Mom, if she finds out about Dad's real will, we're both going to prison for fraud. The video ended. I called Christopher immediately. How long have you had this? I found it 3 days ago. I'd set up a security camera in my home office because some equipment had gone missing. I forgot it was recording. When I reviewed the footage, I found this conversation. Alexis, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. What are you going to do? I've already filed for an annulment. My lawyer says we have grounds based on fraud. She misrepresented her financial situation and her character. But more than that. I can't be married to someone capable of this. Of deliberately defrauding family members and then planning to cover it up. Christopher, I need you to testify. If this goes to court, I need you to share this video and tell the truth about what you've learned. There was a long pause. Alexis, if I do that, I'm burning every bridge with your family. Anna, your mother, anyone who might side with them. I know. I'm asking anyway. Another pause. Then, okay. I'll testify. What they did to you, what they did to your father, it's not right. Someone needs to stand up for what's right. After we hung up, I forwarded the video to Laura Fitzgerald. Her response came within minutes. This is it. This is everything we need. Between the video, the medical records, the witness statements, and the financial records, we can prove systematic fraud. I'm filing a civil suit tomorrow morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dad, confused and dying, signing documents he didn't understand. I thought about all the money that should have been mine and Anna's, spent on Mom's luxury lifestyle. I thought about the clients Anna had defrauded, people who'd trusted her and lost their savings. But most of all, I thought about the group chat message, "This is where she belongs. Out here is for real family only." They'd tried to lock me away, to keep me from seeing the truth. But instead, they'd given me the motivation to uncover everything. The helicopters had been dramatic. But what came next would be devastating. Laura filed the lawsuit the next morning. The complaint was 63 pages long and included charges of undue influence in the modification of Robert Hartley's will, elder financial abuse, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of funds, intentional infliction of emotional distress. She also filed complaints with the California State Bar against the attorney who'd supervised Dad's will signing, and with the district attorney's office requesting investigation of potential criminal fraud. The lawsuit wasn't just about money. It was about justice. And it was about making sure that what happened to me, and to Dad, and to Anna's clients, was documented in public record where no one could deny it or hide it. Within hours of the filing, my phone started ringing again. But this time, the calls weren't from critics or curious wedding guests. They were from other victims. "Dr. Chen-Hartley, I'm calling because I saw the lawsuit. Your sister took $40,000 from me and never completed the work. Can I join the case? Is this the daughter who had the helicopters at the wedding? I need to tell you what your mother did to my elderly father. She was his financial advisor and convinced him to invest in your sister's business. He lost everything. I worked for Hartley and Company for 6 months. I was never paid. Your sister kept promising the money was coming, but it never did. I want to testify." By the end of the day, Laura had been contacted by 17 additional people who'd been financially harmed by Mom or Anna. The scope of the fraud was far larger than I'd imagined. "This isn't just a family dispute anymore," Laura told me that evening. "This is a pattern of financial predation. Your mother and sister have been running schemes for years, and you were just the first victim because you were the easiest target, family who trusted them." The news media picked up the lawsuit story immediately. The same outlets that had covered the helicopter wedding incident now had an even better story. The dramatic family confrontation had been just the beginning of a massive fraud case. "Air Force Colonel sues mother and sister for fraud," read the headlines. Wedding helicopter drama was just the start. Lawsuit alleges years of family financial abuse. From locked bathroom to courtroom, military doctor exposes family's alleged fraud scheme. The court of public opinion, which had been divided about whether my helicopter stunt was justified, now swung heavily in my favor. The evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too clear. Mom and Anna tried to fight back. They issued a statement through their lawyer claiming I was a disgruntled family member making false accusations for attention. But when reporters started contacting Anna's former clients, when the medical records from Dad's oncologist became public, when Christopher's video was leaked to the media, their denials became increasingly desperate. 3 weeks after the lawsuit was filed, the district attorney's office announced they were opening a criminal investigation into possible elder abuse and fraud related to Robert Hartley's will. 2 weeks after that, Anna was arrested for fraud related to her interior design business. The charges involved multiple counts of theft by false pretenses and operating a scheme to defraud. And 1 month after the helicopters landed at the wedding, Mom received a subpoena to appear before a grand jury investigating elder financial abuse. The dramatic helicopter arrival had forced everyone to see me. But the evidence I'd gathered, with help from people who'd witnessed the truth and finally felt safe coming forward, would ensure that justice was served. I'd spent 34 years being invisible, being dismissed, being treated like I didn't matter. Now, Mom and Anna's crimes were visible to everyone. And there was no group chat, no locked bathroom, no amount of manipulation that could make the truth disappear. The reckoning had begun. The preliminary hearing took place on a cold Tuesday morning in November, exactly 6 weeks after the helicopter incident. The Napa County Superior Court was packed with journalists, former clients of Anna's, and curious spectators who'd been following the story since that viral wedding video. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Laura Fitzgerald, watching as Mom and Anna entered through the side door with their legal team. Mom had aged visibly in the past 6 weeks, her hair was grayer, her face drawn and haggard. The polished society woman who'd orchestrated my exclusion from family events looked diminished, almost fragile. Anna, on the other hand, looked defiant. She dressed carefully in a conservative suit, her hair pulled back, makeup minimal. But her eyes were hard as they swept across the courtroom, pointedly avoiding mine. Judge Raymond Chen, no relation to me, presided. He was known as a fair but exacting jurist who had little patience for courtroom theatrics or legal maneuvering designed to delay proceedings. This is a preliminary hearing to determine whether sufficient evidence exists to proceed to trial, Judge Chen began. Miss Fitzgerald, you may present your opening argument. Laura stood, gathering her notes but not really needing them. She'd prepared for this moment meticulously. Your Honor, this case involves a pattern of financial exploitation spanning nearly a decade. The defendants, Diane Hartley and Anastasia Hartley Rothwell, systematically defrauded multiple victims, including the plaintiff, Dr. Alexis Chen-Hartley. But their most egregious crime was the manipulation of a dying man, Robert Hartley, husband to one defendant and father to both, to alter his will under circumstances that strongly suggest undue influence and possible elder abuse. Laura walked the judge through the timeline methodically. Dad's cancer diagnosis. His deteriorating cognitive function. The first will that split assets equally between his daughters. Then, months before his death, when his brain tumor had severely impaired his judgment, a sudden change that gave most of the estate to Mom. We have testimony from Dr. James Whitmore, Mr. Hartley's oncologist, stating explicitly that Robert Hartley was not capable of making sound legal decisions during the period when this will was allegedly changed. We have evidence that Mrs. Diane Hartley deliberately sought out an inexperienced attorney who would not question her husband's mental capacity. And we have a recorded voicemail where Mrs. Hartley threatened Dr. Whitmore after he refused to provide documentation of competency. The defense attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Marcus Webb, objected several times, arguing that the will had been properly executed according to California law. But Judge Chen allowed Laura to continue. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that the defendant Anastasia Hartley operated a fraudulent business scheme, taking deposits from multiple clients with no intention of completing the work. She defrauded at least 14 clients of over $250,000. And in a recorded conversation, she explicitly acknowledged awareness of the fraud related to her father's will, stating, if she finds out about Dad's real will, we're both going to prison for fraud. Laura played Christopher's video for the court. The courtroom was silent as Anna's voice filled the space, casually discussing the fraud as if it were a minor inconvenience rather than a serious crime. When the video ended, Anna's face had gone pale. Mom was staring straight ahead, jaw clenched. The defense tried to argue that the video was obtained illegally, that it had been taken out of context, that Anna was just speaking hypothetically about her sister's paranoid suspicions. But the words were too clear, too specific, too damning. Judge Chen called a brief recess, then returned with his decision. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds sufficient grounds to proceed to trial on all counts. The evidence of potential undue influence in the modification of Robert Hartley's will is particularly concerning, as is the recorded admission by one defendant of fraudulent activity. Trial is set for January 15. Defendants are ordered to surrender their passports and remain within California pending trial. The gavel came down. Mom finally looked at me then, across the courtroom. For a moment, our eyes met. I saw something I'd never seen before in her face, not anger, not defiance, but fear. Real, genuine fear of consequences she could no longer avoid. Outside the courthouse, Laura gave a brief statement to the assembled media. Justice delayed is not justice denied. The Hartley family's victims will finally have their day in court. Reporters shouted questions at me as I walked to my car, but I said nothing. The evidence would speak for itself. That evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't immediately recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Dr. Chen-Hartley? My name is Rachel Hartley. I'm your father's sister. Your aunt." I sat down slowly. I didn't know I had an aunt. Your mother made sure of that. She cut off contact with your father's entire family about 15 years ago. Said we were too involved in their marriage. But I've been following the news about the lawsuit, and there's something you need to know about your father's will. Rachel told me she'd been at the hospital during Dad's final weeks. Mom had banned her from visiting, but Rachel had come anyway one afternoon when Mom wasn't there. Your father was having a lucid moment. They came and went near the end. He grabbed my hand and said, "Rachel, I need you to promise me something. If anything happens to my will, if Diane tries to change things after I'm gone, you tell my girls the truth. Tell them I wanted everything split equally. Tell them I loved them both the same." Rachel's voice broke. He knew, Alexis. Your father knew your mother would try something. He was trying to protect you, but he was too weak to fight her by then. Why didn't you come forward 6 years ago when the will was probated? I tried. I contacted the probate attorney and said I had concerns about the will's validity. Your mother threatened to sue me for harassment. Her lawyer sent letters saying if I interfered, they'd pursue criminal charges for elder abuse, claiming I was the one who tried to manipulate your father. I was terrified. I'm ashamed to say I backed down. Rachel paused. But when I saw those helicopters on the news, when I saw you finally standing up to them, I realized I should have been braver 6 years ago. So I'm being brave now. I'll testify. I'll tell the court exactly what your father said to me. Over the next few weeks, more pieces fell into place. A nurse who'd cared for Dad in hospice came forward with notes showing that Mom had restricted his visitors and controlled all his communications in the final weeks. A neighbor testified that she'd witnessed Mom coaching Dad on what to say to the attorney who drafted the second will. Most devastating was testimony from the attorney himself, now more experienced and willing to acknowledge his mistake. In hindsight, I should have refused to proceed with the will modification. The client was clearly not capable of understanding what he was signing. But Mrs. Hartley was very insistent, and I was concerned about losing what seemed like a lucrative client. I've regretted that decision for 6 years. The criminal investigation proceeded in parallel with the civil lawsuit. The district attorney's office brought charges against Mom for elder financial abuse and against Anna for fraud and grand theft. Both faced potential prison time if convicted. Anna's arrest had been particularly dramatic. She tried to flee to Mexico using her maiden name, but was stopped at the San Diego border crossing. The attempt to flee added a charge of flight to avoid prosecution and convinced the judge to revoke her bail. She spent 3 weeks in county jail before Christopher's family, surprisingly, paid her bail, apparently at Christopher's insistence that she deserved a fair trial even if he no longer believed in her innocence. The preliminary hearing for the criminal case came in early December. This time, the charges were read in open court with local media streaming the proceedings live. The State of California versus Diane Margaret Hartley. Count 1, elder financial abuse. Count 2, fraud. Count 3, forgery of legal documents. Count 4, conspiracy to commit fraud. The State of California versus Anastasia Marie Hartley Rothwell. Count 1, Grand Theft. Count 2 through Count 14, Fraud. Count 15, Operating a scheme to defraud. Count 16, Flight to avoid prosecution. Each count carried potential prison time. Together, Mom faced up to 12 years. Anna faced up to 25 years. Their new attorney, they'd burned through 3 legal teams by this point, each one recognizing the case was unwinnable, tried to negotiate a plea deal. The prosecution's offer was harsh: plead guilty to all charges, full restitution to all victims, and serve at least 60% of their sentences. No early release. No probation. Mom and Anna refused. They were going to trial. The media coverage intensified as the trial date approached. The story had everything: family betrayal, military drama, financial fraud, a dying man's will, and that spectacular helicopter entrance that had started it all. 48 Hours requested an interview. Dateline sent producers to film a segment. The local news ran a series called The Hartley Family Fraud: How a Wedding Became a Criminal Case. I declined most interview requests, but I did agree to speak with a journalist from the California Law Review who was writing an academic piece about elder financial abuse and how it often goes undetected within families. The thing people don't understand, I told her, is that financial abuse by family members is incredibly common but rarely prosecuted. Victims feel ashamed, or they don't want to believe their loved ones would hurt them. And abusers count on that shame and denial to continue exploiting people. The article, when published, became required reading in several law school courses on elder law and family exploitation. But the most unexpected development came from Christopher. Despite the annulment proceedings, he'd stayed in touch with me, providing information and support throughout the investigation. I keep thinking about what Anna said in that recording, he told me during one of our phone conversations. People forget. She was counting on everyone forgetting what she'd done, just moving on, giving her another chance to restart somewhere new with someone else's money. If you hadn't stood up to them, if those helicopters hadn't forced everyone to pay attention, they would have kept doing this to other people indefinitely. Do you regret marrying her? A long pause. I regret not seeing who she really was. But I don't regret how it ended. The annulment was granted last week, by the way. Grounds of fraud. The marriage is legally void, as if it never happened. How are you doing with all of this? Honestly? I'm relieved. I married someone I thought I knew, but she was performing a role. The real Anna is someone who laughs about locking her sister in bathrooms and casually discusses committing fraud. I'm glad I found out after 6 weeks instead of after 6 years. On January 14th, the day before trial was set to begin, Laura called me with unexpected news. They want to settle. Both the civil case and the criminal charges. Your mother and sister are ready to plead guilty. I felt something release in my chest, tension I'd been carrying for months. What are the terms? Full guilty pleas on all charges. They'll allocate responsibility in court, meaning they'll stand up and admit exactly what they did. Your mother will serve 5 years in state prison, no early release. Anna will serve 8 years. Both will be required to pay full restitution to all victims, you, Anna's former clients, everyone. The house, the cars, all assets will be liquidated to pay what they owe. And if they don't agree to these terms? Then we go to trial, and based on the evidence, they're both looking at maximum sentences. The DA made it clear, this is their only chance to show remorse and take responsibility. If they force a trial, the state will pursue the harshest penalties possible. What do you think I should do? Laura was quiet for a moment. Alexis, I've been a lawyer for 28 years. I've seen hundreds of family disputes, fraud cases, elder abuse prosecutions. And I've learned that sometimes the most important thing isn't maximum punishment, it's accountability. Making sure the truth is stated clearly, in public record, where it can never be denied or rewritten. You think I should accept the deal? I think you should consider whether what you really want is for them to spend slightly more time in prison, or whether what you want is for them to stand up in open court and admit what they did. Not just to you, but to your father. To all their victims. To everyone who's been following this story. I thought about Dad, confused and dying, signing documents he didn't understand. I thought about the clients Anna had defrauded, people who'd lost their savings to her lies. I thought about myself at 34, locked in a bathroom while my family laughed about me in a group chat. I want the allocation, I said. I want them to say it out loud, in their own words, exactly what they did. Then that's what we'll demand. The allocation hearing took place on January 15 in the same courtroom where the preliminary hearing had been held. This time, the gallery was even more packed. Every victim, every witness, every person who'd been touched by this case seemed to be present. Judge Chen took his seat and reviewed the plea agreement documents. This is highly unusual, he said, to have both civil and criminal matters resolved simultaneously with a detailed allocation of responsibility. But given the circumstances and the number of victims involved, the court will allow it. He looked at Mom and Anna, who stood beside their attorney, both looking smaller somehow than they had months earlier. Mrs. Hartley, Ms. Rothwell, you've agreed to plead guilty to all charges and to provide a detailed allocation of your actions. This means you'll stand before this court and explain, in your own words, exactly what you did and why you did it. Do you understand? They both nodded. Then proceed. Mom went first. Her voice was quiet, shaking, but clear enough for the court reporter and the live stream to capture every word. 6 years ago, my husband Robert was dying of pancreatic cancer. In his final months, the tumor spread to his brain, and he became confused. He didn't always know where he was or who I was. His doctor said he wasn't capable of making legal decisions. She paused, took a breath. But I didn't care about what his doctor said. I wanted to make sure I would be financially secure after he died. So I took him to a different attorney, one who didn't know him, and I coached him on what to say. I helped him sign a new will that left most of his estate to me instead of splitting it between our daughters as he'd originally intended. The courtroom was absolutely silent. I knew it was wrong. I knew he wouldn't have wanted this. But I did it anyway because I was afraid of not having enough money. And then I threatened his doctor when he tried to speak up about Robert's mental condition. I intimidated witnesses. I manipulated a dying man to benefit myself. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she continued. And I taught my daughter that this was acceptable. That family could be exploited. That the people who loved us were resources to be used. I take full responsibility for the fraud, for the elder abuse, and for creating an environment where my daughter thought this behavior was normal. Judge Chen nodded. Ms. Rothwell, your turn. Anna's voice was harder, less emotional, but she spoke clearly. I used $75,000 that my sister gave me to start a business. I promised to pay her back but never intended to. When the business started failing, instead of admitting it, I took deposits from clients knowing I wouldn't complete their projects. I defrauded 14 people of over $250,000 total. She looked directly at me for the first time. I treated my sister like she was less important than me our entire lives. I let my mother lock her in a bathroom at my wedding. I laughed about it. And when she started asking questions about our family's finances, I tried to keep her away because I knew if she looked too closely, she'd discover everything we'd done. Anna's voice cracked slightly. My sister worked night shifts to help pay for our father's cancer treatment while I was at private school complaining about uniforms. She gave me money to start my business while she was still paying off her own student loans. She sacrificed for our family over and over, and we repaid her with cruelty and theft. I take full responsibility for my fraud, for my treatment of my sister, and for my role in covering up what our mother did to our father's will. Judge Chen let the silence stretch for a long moment. Then he spoke. I've presided over hundreds of criminal cases. I've seen defendants express remorse, show regret, apologize profusely. But rarely have I seen this level of detailed accountability. You've both admitted, in specific terms, exactly what you did and why it was wrong. He reviewed the plea agreement one more time. The court accepts these guilty pleas. Mrs. Hartley, you are sentenced to 5 years in state prison. Ms. Rothwell, you are sentenced to 8 years. Both of you will pay full restitution to all victims. All assets will be liquidated immediately to begin the restitution process. The gavel came down with finality. Mom and Anna were led away by bailiffs, both of them in handcuffs now. Mom looked back at me once, her face wet with tears, mouthing something I couldn't quite make out. Maybe, I'm sorry. Maybe, forgive me. I'd never know for certain. Outside the courthouse, victims gathered to speak with media. Patricia Delgado, who'd lost $42,000 to Anna's business fraud, told reporters, finally someone held them accountable. Finally someone made them tell the truth. Laura Fitzgerald gave a statement praising the allocation process. These defendants did more than plead guilty. They explained their actions. They took responsibility. That's rare and important. And I stood there, watching it all, feeling something I hadn't expected to feel, not triumph, not satisfaction, but a quiet sense of completion. Justice hadn't just been served. The truth had been spoken, recorded, made permanent in court records that couldn't be erased or rewritten. My father's wishes would finally be honored. The victims would be repaid. And 2 women who'd spent years exploiting the people who loved them would face real consequences for their actions. The helicopters had made everyone look. But it was the evidence, the witnesses, the systematic documentation of years of fraud, that had made sure everyone saw the truth. And now, finally, I could begin to heal. The liquidation of Mom and Anna's assets began within days of sentencing. The process was overseen by a court-appointed trustee whose job was to convert everything they owned into cash for victim restitution. Mom's downtown condo sold first, a waterfront property in Bellevue that she'd purchased for $1.2 million 3 years ago. It went for $1.35 million at auction, with every penny going into the restitution fund. Her Mercedes, her jewelry collection, even the furniture from the condo, everything was catalogued, appraised, and sold. Anna's possessions were more modest but still substantial. The leased BMW was returned. Her designer wardrobe, which included over $40,000 worth of clothes and accessories, was sold through a consignment service. Even her wedding dress, never worn beyond that disastrous ceremony, was auctioned online. The trustees' preliminary calculations showed that after all assets were liquidated, there would be approximately $890,000 available for distribution among victims. I was owed $75,000 for Anna's business loan. The 14 clients she defrauded were owed a combined $247,000. The estate, meaning what should have been distributed according to Dad's original will, represented roughly $1.8 million that Mom had misappropriated. The math was complicated, but Laura worked with the trustee to ensure fair distribution. Nobody gets made completely whole, she explained. There isn't enough money for that. But everyone will receive a substantial portion of what they're owed, and the court record makes clear who was wronged and by how much. I made a decision that surprised even Laura. I want my portion of the restitution to go to Anna's clients first. They lost their savings to her fraud. I'm a colonel with a good salary and savings. I don't need the money like they do. Alexis, you're entitled to that restitution. You were defrauded just like they were. I know. But I also have resources they don't. Patricia Delgado lost $42,000, that's probably her entire savings. The same for the others. They need it more than I do. Laura smiled. Your father would be proud of you. The comment hit me harder than expected. For 6 years, I'd believed Dad had chosen to leave me less in his will because I was somehow less important. Learning the truth, that he'd wanted to split everything equally, that he'd been manipulated in his weakest moment, had reframed my entire understanding of his love for me. I wish he could have seen me stand up to them, I said quietly. I wish he could have known that I finally stopped accepting their treatment. He knew you were strong, Alexis. That's what he told you in the hospital, remember? He knew eventually you'd find your way. The restitution payments went out in March, 4 months after the sentencing. Each of Anna's victims received roughly 75% of what they'd lost. Patricia Delgado called me in tears when she received her check. I never thought I'd see this money again. I'd accepted it was gone. But you fought for us. You didn't have to, but you did. Nobody should profit from fraud, I told her. And nobody should have to accept being victimized by family. But the financial restitution was only part of the consequences Mom and Anna faced. The social consequences were equally devastating. Mom's name was removed from every charity board she'd served on. The country club where she'd been a member for 20 years revoked her membership. Friends who'd socialized with her for decades stopped taking her calls, embarrassed to be associated with someone convicted of elder abuse and fraud. Anna's situation was even worse. Her name became synonymous in design circles with fraud and unprofessionalism. A simple Google search brought up dozens of articles about her crimes. Her Instagram account, once full of polished design photos and lifestyle content, was now flooded with comments from victims and critics. Christopher, to his credit, handled the situation with more grace than most people would have. Despite the annulment, he made a public statement expressing sympathy for Anna's victims and donating $25,000 to an elder abuse prevention nonprofit in my father's name. What Anna did was wrong, his statement read. But this situation also highlights how common financial abuse within families really is. My hope is that this case encourages other victims to come forward and seek justice, knowing they'll be believed and supported. The statement generated its own news coverage and started conversations about how family members, especially those designated as strong or capable, are often systematically exploited by relatives who take advantage of their generosity and loyalty. I received letters from dozens of people sharing similar stories. Adult children who'd been financially drained by parents. Siblings who'd given loans that were never repaid. Family members who'd been excluded, dismissed, or treated as less important than others. Your story gave me courage to finally say no to my mother's constant requests for money, one woman wrote. I've been supporting her lifestyle for 15 years while she tells everyone I'm selfish. But I'm not selfish, I'm just done being exploited. Another letter came from a man whose brother had defrauded him of inheritance after their father's death. I was told I was being difficult for questioning the will. That I should just accept it and move on. But your case showed me that asking questions isn't difficult, it's necessary. I'm hiring a lawyer. The ripple effects of the case extended beyond individual families. California legislators introduced new protections for potential will beneficiaries, making it easier to challenge wills when there's evidence of undue influence. Several law schools added units on family financial abuse to their elder law courses. The story became a case study in how systems can fail to protect vulnerable people when the abusers are family members. But for me personally, the most significant change wasn't legal or social, it was internal. For 34 years, I'd carried a fundamental belief that I wasn't quite good enough, wasn't quite worthy of love and respect, wasn't quite as valuable as other people. I'd internalized my family's treatment of me as somehow deserved, as the natural consequence of being too strong or too capable or just somehow fundamentally different. Therapy helped me understand how deeply that conditioning had affected me. I'd started seeing Dr. Sarah Kim, a psychologist who specialized in family trauma, shortly after the criminal trial ended. You were parentified, Dr. Kim explained during one of our sessions. From a very young age, you were given adult responsibilities and expectations. You took care of your father's medical bills. You supported your sister financially. You were expected to be endlessly capable and never need anything in return. That's not normal child development, that's exploitation disguised as being the strong one. But I was proud of being strong. I liked that I could handle things. Of course you were. Children adapt to survive. If being strong and capable got you any attention at all from your mother, even negative attention, then you'd naturally lean into that identity. But Alexis, children shouldn't have to earn love by being useful. They should be loved simply for existing. The concept was so foreign to me that I struggled to accept it for months. How could I deserve love and care if I wasn't providing value? If I wasn't solving problems or supporting others or proving my worth through achievements? That's the core wound, Dr. Kim said gently. You believe love is something you earn rather than something you deserve simply by being human. Your family reinforced that belief every single day. But it's not true. It never was true. Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild my understanding of myself. Not as the strong daughter who never needed anything. Not as the capable sister who always had solutions. But as a person, flawed, complicated, sometimes needy, who deserved kindness and respect regardless of what I could provide others. The helicopter incident, which had seemed at the time like an act of revenge or dramatic justice, was actually something deeper. It was the first time in my life I demanded to be seen on my own terms. Not as the person they decided I should be, but as the person I actually was. Someone with power. Someone with resources. Someone who refused to be locked away or dismissed or treated as less than. My relationship with my extended family began to heal in unexpected ways. Aunt Rachel, Dad's sister who'd testified about his final wishes, became a regular presence in my life. We met for coffee every few weeks, and she shared stories about Dad's childhood, his dreams, his struggles. "Your father loved you so much," she told me during one of these conversations. "He used to call me and talk about your achievements, your medical school acceptance, your military commission, your research publications. He was so proud, Alexis. He just didn't know how to show it in a way that your mother wouldn't sabotage." "What do you mean?" Rachel's expression turned sad. "Diane was jealous of you. You were smart like Robert, driven like Robert. Anna was more like Diane, concerned with appearances and social status. Every time Robert praised you, Diane would find ways to minimize it or redirect attention to Anna. Eventually, he learned to keep his pride in you private because showing it caused conflict at home." The revelation reframed years of memories. Dad's quiet smiles when I shared good news. The way he'd slip money into my pocket before I left after visits, whispering, "For you, don't tell Mom." The handwritten notes he'd send to my various addresses over the years, "Proud of you, sweetheart. Keep going." He'd loved me. He'd always loved me. He just hadn't been strong enough to fight Mom's manipulation and control. Understanding that brought both peace and sadness. Peace because I could finally release the belief that I hadn't been good enough for him. Sadness because we'd lost so much time to Mom's interference, and now he was gone. But I had Aunt Rachel now. And through her, I connected with other members of Dad's family who'd been cut off by Mom's controlling behavior. Cousins I barely remembered. An uncle who tried to stay in touch but had given up after Mom refused to pass along his messages. "We're having a family reunion," Aunt Rachel announced 6 months after the trial. "The Hartley side of the family, everyone except Diane and Anna. We want to welcome you back properly, make up for lost time." The reunion took place in July at a park in Riverside, not far from where I'd grown up. There were over 30 people there, aunts, uncles, cousins, their children. People who shared Dad's genetic code and, in many cases, his personality traits. I spent the afternoon learning about family history I'd never known. About Dad's childhood, his parents, the values they'd instilled in him about fairness and integrity. About how the family had been confused and hurt when Mom had systematically cut off contact, but hadn't known how to fight it without making things worse. "We should have tried harder," my Uncle Thomas said apologetically. "We should have pushed back when Diane started isolating Robert. But we didn't want to cause problems, and by the time we realized how serious it was, the damage was done." "I understand," I told him. "Challenging family dysfunction is hard. It took me 34 years and a pair of helicopters to finally do it." The family laughed. The helicopter story had become somewhat legendary among the extended Hartley clan. But there was affection in the laughter, not judgment. For the first time in my adult life, I was at a family gathering where I felt genuinely welcome. Where people asked about my work because they were actually interested, not because they were looking for ways to exploit my resources. Where my achievements were celebrated rather than minimized. This was what family was supposed to feel like. At the end of the day, as people were packing up and saying their goodbyes, Aunt Rachel pulled me aside. "Your father would be so happy to see this. To see you surrounded by people who appreciate you, who value you for who you are rather than what you can provide them. He wanted this for you, Alexis. He tried to create it, but Diane wouldn't allow it. Now you've created it yourself. I hugged my aunt tightly, feeling tears I hadn't expected. Thank you for not giving up on me. For coming forward when it mattered. Sweetheart, your family. Real family doesn't give up. The contrast between this gathering and the wedding where I'd been locked in a bathroom couldn't have been more stark. At Anna's wedding, I'd been treated as an embarrassment to hide. Here, I was welcomed, celebrated, valued. 6 months after the reunion, I received notification that Mom and Anna were eligible to send letters from prison. The system allowed inmates to request contact with family members, though recipients could decline. I declined Mom's request immediately. There was nothing she could say that would change what had happened, no apology that could undo decades of manipulation and abuse. But Anna's request made me pause. After discussing it with Dr. Kim, I agreed to receive one letter. Not because I was ready to forgive or reconcile, but because I was curious what she might say now that she'd had time to sit with the consequences of her actions. The letter arrived 3 weeks later. It was handwritten on prison stationery, Anna's usually elegant handwriting now shaky and uneven. Dear Alexis. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not even asking you to. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did to you, and I'm sorry. Prison has given me a lot of time to think. Time to look back at our childhood, our relationship, all the ways I took advantage of you. Mom always told me I was special, that I deserved the best, that you were strong enough that you didn't need the same care and attention I did. I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to believe her because it made me feel important. But here's what I've figured out, treating someone badly and calling them strong enough to handle it is just abuse with better marketing. You weren't stronger than me. You were just forced to become self-sufficient because nobody was taking care of you. I took your money. I took your sacrifices. I took your love and support. And I gave you nothing back except cruelty and exclusion. The worst part is that I knew I was doing it. That recording Christopher made, where I talked about keeping you away from the wedding, that wasn't me being manipulated by Mom. That was me making a conscious choice to hurt you because it was convenient. I don't know if I can ever be the person you deserved as a sister. Maybe I'm too damaged from how Mom raised me. Maybe I'm just not capable of the kind of integrity you have. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see who you are, someone who could have destroyed us completely but instead just demanded truth and accountability. Someone who gave up their own restitution money to help my fraud victims. You're better than I ever gave you credit for. Better than I'll probably ever be. I'm sorry, Lexi. For everything. Anna. I read the letter 3 times, processing the words and the emotions they stirred. Part of me wanted to believe this represented genuine growth and remorse. Part of me wondered if it was just another manipulation, Anna figuring out what I wanted to hear and delivering it. Dr. Kim helped me sit with the ambiguity. You don't have to decide right now whether her remorse is genuine. You don't have to forgive her or maintain contact just because she apologized. You can simply acknowledge that she wrote it, that it contains what sounds like awareness of her actions, and then make decisions about your relationship based on what's healthy for you. I wrote back one letter. Short, measured, honest. Anna. I received your letter. I appreciate the apology and the acknowledgement of what you did. Whether this represents real change or not, only time will tell. Either way, I'm not interested in rebuilding a relationship with you. What you and Mom did caused damage that can't be repaired with words. You stole my father's final wishes. You took advantage of my love and trust. You treated me with cruelty while pretending it was normal sister dynamics. I hope you use your time in prison to genuinely change. I hope you become someone capable of treating others with respect and integrity. But that growth will happen without me in your life. I wish you well, but from a distance. Alexis. After sending the letter, I felt something release that I hadn't even realized I'd been holding on to. The last threads of obligation to maintain family relationships just because we shared DNA. I was done trying to earn love from people who'd never been capable of giving it freely. I was done accepting crumbs and calling it family. I was done making excuses for people who'd shown me repeatedly who they really were. The helicopters had been about making noise, about refusing to be silenced or locked away. But this, the quiet boundary setting, the deliberate choice to walk away from toxic relationships, this was about something more important. This was about choosing myself. And for the first time in 34 years, that felt like enough. 18 months after the helicopters landed at Meadowbrook Estate, I stood in the auditorium at the Women's Leadership Summit in Seattle, preparing to deliver the keynote address. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same woman who'd once been locked in a bathroom by her family was now being asked to speak to 2,000 professionals about overcoming adversity and finding authentic power. The conference organizer had reached out 6 months earlier. Dr. Chen-Hartley, your story has resonated with so many people. Not just the dramatic helicopter moment, but everything that came after. The courage to pursue justice. The willingness to set boundaries. The choice to build a life on your own terms. We'd be honored if you'd share your journey with our attendees. I'd hesitated initially. Public speaking about professional topics was comfortable. I'd given dozens of presentations on aerospace medicine and emergency protocols. But talking about personal trauma, family dysfunction, and the messy process of healing? That was terrifyingly vulnerable. Dr. Kim had encouraged me to accept. Alexis, you've spent your entire life being told your experiences don't matter, that your pain should be hidden, that asking for support makes you weak. Speaking publicly about what you've been through is the opposite of all those messages. It's claiming your story as valuable and worth sharing. So I'd said yes. Now, standing backstage listening to my introduction, I felt the familiar flutter of nerves. But underneath the anxiety was something else, a solid core of certainty about who I was and what I'd learned. Please welcome Dr. Alexis Chen-Hartley, Colonel in the United States Air Force Reserve, emergency medicine physician at Johns Hopkins, and today's keynote speaker. The applause as I walked onto the stage was warm and sustained. I took a moment to look out at the audience, rows and rows of professional women from every industry imaginable, all of whom had faced their own challenges and fought their own battles to reach positions of influence. Thank you for being here, I began, my voice steady. I want to start by acknowledging that the story many of you know about me involves helicopters, a wedding, and a rather dramatic family confrontation. But that's not where the real story begins, and it's certainly not where it ends. I told them about growing up as the designated, strong daughter. About sacrificing college to pay for dad's medical bills. About the pattern of being expected to give endlessly while receiving almost nothing in return. For 34 years, I believed that if I just tried harder, achieved more, gave more, my family would finally see my worth. But here's what I learned: you cannot earn love from people who are fundamentally incapable of giving it. And trying to do so only diminishes you. The audience was completely engaged, leaning forward in their seats. The helicopters were dramatic, yes. But they weren't about revenge. They were about refusing to be invisible anymore. They were about demanding to be seen on my own terms after a lifetime of being told I was too much or not enough, never just right as I was. I talked about the legal process, the discovery of systematic fraud, the decision to pursue accountability rather than just walking away quietly. People asked me why I didn't just cut contact and move on. Why go through the trauma of lawsuits and trials? And here's why: because silence protects abusers. Because accepting mistreatment teaches them they can continue. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for others they might harm, is to demand consequences. Several women in the audience were nodding vigorously. But I also want to be honest about the cost. Pursuing justice meant ending relationships with my mother and sister permanently. It meant accepting that the family I'd wanted my entire life would never exist. It meant grieving not just what I'd lost, but what I'd never actually had. I paused, gathering my thoughts for the most important part. The real transformation didn't happen in the courtroom. It happened in therapy, where I had to dismantle 34 years of conditioning that told me my value came from what I could provide others. It happened in building new relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. It happened when I finally accepted that being strong doesn't mean never needing support, it means having the courage to ask for it. I shared about finding Dad's extended family, about the reunion where I'd felt genuinely welcomed for the first time. About learning that healthy relationships don't require you to constantly prove your worth. Here's what I wish someone had told me at 20, or 25, or even 30. You're not required to maintain relationships with people who consistently harm you, even if they're family. Loyalty is not the same as accepting abuse. And choosing yourself is not selfish, it's survival. The applause after that statement was spontaneous and prolonged. I see some of you crying. I see recognition in your faces. And I want you to know that whatever situation you're in, whatever family dynamics you're navigating, you are not alone. The statistics on family financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and systematic favoritism are staggering. Millions of people are living through what I experienced. The difference is that most never speak up because they've been conditioned to believe that family dysfunction should stay private. I took a breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. But privacy protects perpetrators. Silence enables abuse. And the belief that we should just accept mistreatment from family because that's how they are, or they don't mean it, or family is forever, that belief keeps countless people trapped in relationships that damage them. Someone in the front row was openly crying now, and several others were reaching for tissues. So here's my challenge to you: identify one relationship in your life where you're giving far more than you're receiving. Where you're making excuses for behavior you'd never tolerate from a friend or colleague. Where you're diminishing yourself to make someone else comfortable. And ask yourself, what would it look like to set a boundary? To demand respect? To choose yourself? I could see the question landing, see people processing it against their own experiences. Will it be comfortable? No. Will some people be angry? Absolutely. Will you face criticism from people who benefited from your compliance? Without a doubt. But will you finally be free to build a life based on authenticity rather than obligation? Yes. I told them about my work now, not just the military service and medical practice, but the advocacy for elder abuse awareness, the support group I'd started for adult children dealing with family financial exploitation, the scholarship fund I'd established in Dad's name for first-generation college students pursuing healthcare careers. I took the pain of what happened and transformed it into purpose. Not because I'm special or unusually strong, but because I made a choice. I chose to believe that my experiences could help others. That my story, as messy and complicated as it is, has value. As I approached the conclusion of my speech, I realized I'd been talking for nearly 45 minutes, but no one in the audience looked bored or distracted. They were with me, connected to this story in ways that transcended the specific details. I want to close with something my father told me in the hospital before he died. He said, "You've always been the strong one, Alexis. Don't ever forget that." For years, I interpreted that as permission for my family to treat me poorly, as if being strong meant I could withstand any amount of neglect or abuse. My voice caught slightly, but I continued. But now I understand what he really meant. Being strong doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. It means having the courage to demand better. Being strong doesn't mean never needing support. It means being brave enough to ask for it. Being strong doesn't mean staying in relationships that harm you. It means having the integrity to walk away. I looked out at 2,000 faces, many tear-stained, all attentive. You are strong enough to choose yourself. You are worthy of relationships that honor you. You deserve to take up space, to make noise, to refuse to be locked away, literally or metaphorically, by people who are threatened by your power. The final words came from somewhere deep and true. They locked me in a bathroom at my sister's wedding. But I called 5 helicopters and changed everything. Not because I'm special, but because I finally understood a fundamental truth. I am the only person who gets to decide how I'm treated. And so are you. The standing ovation started before I'd finished my last sentence. 2,000 women rose to their feet, applause thundering through the auditorium in waves that seemed to go on forever. I stood there, letting it wash over me, feeling the connection to every person in that room who'd faced similar choices and similar pain. After the speech, the line of people wanting to speak with me stretched for nearly 2 hours. Person after person shared their stories: mothers who controlled through guilt, siblings who exploited through manipulation, partners who diminished through constant criticism. "You gave me permission to set boundaries," one woman told me tearfully. "I've been supporting my sister financially for 10 years while she tells everyone I'm selfish. After hearing your story, I'm finally going to say no." Another woman, probably in her 60s, gripped my hands tightly. "My daughter has been stealing from me for years. I made excuses because she's family. But you're right, privacy protects perpetrators. I'm going to the police tomorrow." A younger woman, maybe mid-20s, said simply, "Thank you for showing me what strength actually looks like. I've been told I'm strong my whole life, but it was just an excuse for people to take advantage of me. Not anymore." The encounters were exhausting and energizing in equal measure. Each person represented someone who might now choose themselves, who might set boundaries, who might refuse to accept being treated as less than they deserved. That evening, back in my hotel room, I received a message from Aunt Rachel. She'd watched the live stream of the speech. "Alexis, your father would have been so incredibly proud. Not just of your achievements or your courage, but of your compassion. You took your pain and used it to help others. That's the best kind of strength there is." I also received an unexpected email from Christopher. We'd stayed in occasional contact, and he'd remarried 6 months ago to someone he described as the opposite of Anna in every way that matters. "Lexi, I watched your speech. I need you to know something. What happened at our wedding, as horrible as it was, changed my life in ways I'm grateful for. You showed me what real integrity looks like. What it means to demand truth even when it's uncomfortable. My new wife Emily and I are building our relationship on those principles: honesty, respect, genuine care. So thank you. For the helicopters, yes, but more importantly, for teaching me what healthy relationships actually look like." I sat with that message for a long time. The helicopters, that dramatic, loud, impossible to ignore demonstration, had been necessary to break through decades of denial and complicity. But the real transformation, for me and apparently for others, had come in the quieter moments afterward. The boundary setting. The truth-telling. The choice to build new relationships based on different values. 2 years after that wedding, my life looked completely different. I'd been promoted to Chief of Aerospace Medicine for the entire reserve component, overseeing medical operations across multiple bases. My research on high-altitude physiology had been published in 3 major journals. Johns Hopkins had offered me a leadership position in their emergency medicine department. But more importantly, I'd built a chosen family that actually functioned like family should. Aunt Rachel and I had dinner every month. The extended Hartley clan included me in holidays and celebrations. I'd formed deep friendships with colleagues who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. I'd also started dating someone, Dr. Marcus Webb, an aerospace engineer I'd met through military training exercises. He was kind, respectful, and completely unimpressed by drama or manipulation. Our relationship was refreshingly simple. We enjoyed each other's company, supported each other's goals, and communicated honestly about needs and boundaries. "You know what I appreciate about you," he'd told me early in our relationship. "You don't play games. You say what you mean. You have clear boundaries." It's refreshing after years of dating women who expected me to read their minds or who used emotional manipulation to get their way. "That's because I've seen what the alternative looks like," I'd replied. Manipulation and dishonesty nearly destroyed me. I refused to replicate those patterns. The choice to live authentically, to refuse to hide or diminish myself, had opened doors I'd never expected. I received speaking invitations regularly now. Conferences, universities, professional organizations all wanted to hear about overcoming family dysfunction and finding authentic power. I'd also been approached by a literary agent about writing a book. "Your story resonates with millions of people," she'd said. Adult children dealing with toxic families, people who've been financially exploited by relatives, anyone who's been told they're too sensitive for objecting to mistreatment. There's a hunger for honest conversation about family dysfunction and how to heal from it. I was considering the offer. Not because I wanted fame or attention, but because I'd learned that sharing our stories, especially the messy, painful, complicated ones, helped others feel less alone. 3 years after the helicopters, I received notification that Mom was eligible for parole. She'd served 3 years of her 5-year sentence and could apply for early release based on good behavior. The parole board requested victim impact statements. I spent a week writing mine, working with Dr. Kim to articulate the full scope of the damage Mom's actions had caused. My mother's fraud didn't just steal money, I wrote. It stole my relationship with my father's final wishes. It stole years of my life spent believing I wasn't valued by the man who raised me. It stole my trust in family relationships and made me question whether I deserved love and respect. I described the ongoing work of therapy, the difficulty of rebuilding my capacity to trust, the grief of accepting that I would never have the mother I'd needed. But I also want the board to know this: I have healed. Not because my mother has changed or apologized in any meaningful way, but because I chose to heal myself. I built new relationships, set firm boundaries, and created a life based on my own values rather than on trying to earn approval from people incapable of giving it. I concluded, I do not support early release. My mother has served only 60% of her sentence for crimes that caused harm to multiple victims and violated the trust of a dying man. She should complete her full sentence as a demonstration that elder abuse and financial fraud have real consequences. The parole board denied Mom's request. She would serve the full 5 years. Anna, with a longer sentence, wouldn't be eligible for parole for another 3 years minimum. I'd already decided I wouldn't attend that hearing or submit a statement. Anna was no longer part of my life, and I had no interest in continuing to give her my energy or attention. The final piece of healing came unexpectedly. I was clearing out storage boxes in preparation for moving into a house I'd purchased, a beautiful craftsman in a quiet Seattle neighborhood with enough space for both solitude and hosting family gatherings with my chosen community. In one of the boxes, I found a letter from Dad, dated just days before his death. It had been mixed in with medical bills and insurance documents, apparently never mailed. My dearest Lexi. The cancer has taken so much from me, my strength, my clarity, sometimes even my memories. But it hasn't taken my love for you or my pride in the woman you've become. I know things have been hard with your mother and sister. I know you've sacrificed more than you should have had to. I've seen you giving and giving while receiving so little in return, and it breaks my heart that I couldn't protect you from that dynamic. You were never just the strong daughter. You were always my brilliant, compassionate, remarkable girl who deserved to be celebrated, not exploited. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to stand up to your mother's manipulation more effectively. I'm sorry I let her create an environment where Anna learned to take advantage of your generosity. If you're reading this after I'm gone, please know, you don't owe them your loyalty if they continue to treat you poorly. Being family doesn't give people permission to hurt you. And you are not required to accept crumbs of affection and call it love. You deserve so much more, Alexis. You deserve relationships where your worth is celebrated, not just tolerated. You deserve people who give as much as they take. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not just for what you can provide. Be strong, yes. But also be selfish sometimes. Put yourself first. Demand respect. And never forget that you are worthy of love simply because you exist, not because of what you achieve or sacrifice. I love you more than words can express. I'm so proud to be your father. Always, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. He'd known. He'd seen what was happening. And in his final days, even through the confusion and pain, he tried to give me permission to choose myself. I wished he could see me now, living in a home I'd chosen, surrounded by people who valued me authentically, using my voice to help others find their own strength. I wished he could know that I'd finally taken his advice, that I'd demanded respect and built a life worthy of the daughter he'd always believed I could be. But in a way, he did know. Because I was living the life he'd wanted for me. I was strong, yes, but I was also selectively vulnerable, appropriately demanding, and unapologetically myself. The helicopters had announced my arrival as someone who couldn't be dismissed or ignored. But this, the quiet joy of authentic relationships, the peace of firm boundaries, the satisfaction of work that mattered, this was what true freedom looked like. I'd spent 34 years trying to earn a place in a family that saw me as a resource to exploit. Now, at 37, I'd built a family, chosen, authentic, reciprocal, that saw me as a person worthy of love and respect simply because I existed. They'd locked me in a bathroom and laughed about where I belonged. I'd called 5 helicopters and shown them exactly where I belonged, in the sky, flying higher than they'd ever imagined possible, commanding respect they'd never thought to give, and living a life more authentic than anything they'd ever known. And I'd finally learned the most important lesson: sometimes the greatest act of strength is not withstanding mistreatment, but having the courage to demand better and the integrity to walk away when it's not offered. I was free. Truly, completely free. And nothing they could ever say or do would change that again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.